Welcome to Mr. Nightbleed. Tonight, in 20 terrifying true horror stories from America's most haunted graveyards, we cross the rusted gates of cemeteries where names are carved in stone. Flowers wilt overnight and the earth itself remembers what we try to forget. These are chilling tales of bells that ring with no wind, voices whispering from cracked mausoleums, and footsteps crunching over gravel when no one is there. This is a brand new channel, and my goal this month is 2,000 subscribers. Almost 90% of people who watch never subscribe. They just fade back into the dark. Don't be one of them. Before we begin, tell me in the comments, where are you watching from and what time is it for you right now? And if there's a cemetery in your town that gives you chills, type its name. Because once you step past the gates of America's most haunted graveyards, some things follow you home, kill the lights, mute the world. Let's begin. I never planned to visit a cemetery on vacation. It was my girlfriend's idea. The way most of the strangest detours in my life start, Mia collects moments that she says feel like the edge of a dream. Old diners, abandoned motels, weathered churches with hand-painted signs. When she booked a long weekend in Savannah, she had a list, and Bonaventure was written at the top with a little heart drawn next to it. She said the place was beautiful. Tree tunnels and marble angels, the kind of cemetery where grief had taken root and grown into something graceful and complicated. I didn't argue. Mid-June in Georgia meant heat and humidity so thick you could lift it with a fork. But I told myself it would be quiet there, cooler under the live oaks, and maybe I'd get some photographs worth sharing. We drove out late in the afternoon, windows down, cicadas riding the air like a chorus that never took a breath. The river flashed between the trees on our left, brown and patient. At the gate, a sign reminded us of the hours. It would close at sunset. We had time. I parked near a crushed shell path and followed Mia past the office and into a world that smelled like cut grass, damp stone, and the sweet rot of summer. Spanish moss hung in gray streamers from the branches, shifting in a slow breath even when the air was still. The graves felt like small rooms open to the sky. There was beauty in it like she promised, but something else too. A heaviness that collected in the shade. A feeling that a lot of silence had been stored here and might spill if you jostled it. We found little Gracie without meaning to. People had left coins on the base of her statue, lining the ledge in neat half-moons. The marble was the color of cream turned toward winter. Someone had tucked a ribbon behind her shoulder. The girl had a dress that fell in folds around her knees, one hand resting like she'd been taught to sit still for a photograph, the other caught in mid-gesture. The face was what hit me. It wasn't the flat kind of pretty statues sometimes have. It felt specific. It felt like a child you could have met. I heard Mia stop beside me and let out a breath that sounded like a word without letters. I took my camera out of my bag and lifted it, but the viewfinder framed her too perfectly and I lowered it again. Taking a picture felt wrong. A man in a sun-faded cap stood a few yards away, hands in his pockets. A groundskeeper, I thought at first, but his shirt had the logo of a bait shop. He nodded toward us. "She looks different depending on the light," he said. His voice had the sandpaper edge of someone who had smoked too long and laughed a lot anyway. "Morning, she's a little girl. Evening, she's something else." I asked him what he meant. He shrugged like it was the weather. "Depends on who's looking. People say they see her cry when it's been too dry. Might just be condensation from the river air and the heat. I don't pretend to know." He scratched his jaw and tipped his chin at my camera. "If you do take a picture, check it later. The ones that come out wrong are the ones folks remember." Then he walked off between the stones, not like he was leaving, more like he was swallowed by the place. I didn't take a picture. We stayed until the light softened into the kind of gold that makes everything feel like a memory while you're still in it. A golf cart rolled along the path and a woman in a collared shirt called out that they would be closing soon. Mia tugged my hand and we took one last look. I don't know if it was a trick of the falling light or a story my brain wanted to tell, but for a second the marble around the eyes looked wet. Not dripping, not dramatic, just a sheen like dew. The heat wrapped us all the way back to the car. On the drive to our rental, Mia was quiet. She finally said she wanted to go back at sunrise. "The cemetery opens early," she said. "The light will be different then." She said it the same way you say you want to look again at a face you can't place. I told her sure. We'd get coffee, beat the heat. In the middle of the night, a thunderstorm barged over the city, slamming the windows with rain that sounded like thrown pebbles. then moved on and left the streets shining and the air cooler. I woke to the smell of wet asphalt and the low hum of the ceiling fan. When I checked my phone, it was a little after 5. Mia was already up, hair in a knot, keys in her hand. She grinned at me like a kid about to sneak into a swimming pool before the lifeguard showed up. We reached Bonaventure as the sky was still deciding whether to be blue or gray. The gate was open. The sign flipped to welcome the early ones, joggers and dog walkers, and the people who talked to their dead like they never stopped coming to visit. We walked with paper cups of coffee that steamed in the cool air. The sound of the river seemed louder at that hour, like it had fewer other sounds to compete with. We passed an older woman sitting on a bench with her palm pressed to a stone, lips moving. We passed a pair of brothers arguing softly about whether or not to weed around a plot that looked like it hadn't had a visitor in years. I felt like we were in a library where you were allowed to speak as long as you kept your voice kind. Little Gracie was alone. The coins had shifted a little, as if hands had touched them in the night. A damp ring marked the base, and I told myself rain had blown under the trees and pooled in a shape that meant nothing. Mia crouched and inspected the plinth. "There," she said, pointing at a faint streak. I squinted. If you looked for it, you could see a thin track down the curve of the cheek. It might have been a trick the way marble sometimes catches the light differently, where it has been handled more, but it ran clean through a dusting of pollen. The streak had gathered a tiny ridge of yellow at the edge. I put the back of my finger to it, thinking I'd feel nothing. It felt damp. Not wet like a drop of water. Not sticky like the air can be, but damp, like you had pressed your finger to a stone wall in a basement that never completely dries. I pulled my hand back and wiped it on my shorts and said nothing. 2 men with a tripod and a boom mic came up the path and set their gear with the careful clatter of people who do this often. One of them nodded at us and asked if we had gotten anything interesting that morning. I said we weren't filming. He laughed and said we should be, then told his friend to roll. He spoke to the camera. He said the girl statue had a history of weeping. He said some people heard a child humming near the bushes in the spring. He said every place with a legend collects more like burrs on a sock. I didn't like the way his voice sharpened when he said the name, as if he enjoyed coaxing the story forward a little more than he respected it. Mia watched the lens with a look I know well. She can smell when someone has come for the spectacle and not the truth. On the way back to the car, she asked if we could come again at dusk. Dusk is when places admit what they are, she said. I laughed and told her dusk is also when mosquitoes do the same, but I agreed. You don't say no to the person who wants to stand another minute in front of a child's grave. We spent the day drifting through Savannah. We bought pralines and ate them too fast, sugar burning our tongues. We walked River Street and watched a container ship glide past like a steel city moving at the speed of a cloud. We found shade and lost it. By the time we drove back to Bonaventure, the sun was a lazy coin sliding toward the live oaks, and the heat had put a weight behind my eyes. The parking area had more cars than I expected. A book club stood in a loose circle near a sculpted angel, arguing about a scene they loved or hated. A father lifted his son so the boy could read a name carved into a stone that looked like a little bed. A groundskeeper in a green polo shirt was loading bags of mulch into a cart. He had 4 arms like boards and a face that had seen too many summers, but wasn't sorry about it. I asked him if they really closed the gates tight at sunset. He gave me a look that said he had given the same answer 1,000 times. Sunset, he said. Folks forget. They think the dead want company after dark. The dead want what they're given in daylight. After that, it's for the living to leave alone. His name tag said Gerald. He was about to step onto the cart when he paused and added, "If you are still in here when the chains go on, find the main path and walk straight. Do not take the side trails. People get turned around when it's half light. The trees confuse the sky, and don't be touching what isn't yours, especially not the offerings." He drove away with the engine buzzing. A storm was building somewhere inland, throwing up a wall of cloud that looked like a dark shoulder. We heard thunder like someone dragging a couch across a wooden floor. The light went from gold to brass. The shadows around the stones filled like glasses. Mia took my arm and led me back toward the little fenced plot where the statue sat. No one else was there. In the thick air, I could hear the sound of the river clearer than I should. The coins on the plinth were arranged in a way that caught my eye. Not the way people leave them in casual stacks, but lined in a semicircle with one gap as if waiting. I thought of the man's warning. I kept my hands at my sides. Mia took a breath to say something and then didn't. I watched the leaves. The moss almost reached the base like gray hair. The first drops of rain hit with dark coins on the path. It was the kind of rain that starts with statements 1 and 2, far apart while the sky decides. I checked the time and felt a small jolt. We had stayed later than we meant to. I told Mia we should go. She nodded but kept looking at the statue like it had asked her a question. The rain thickened to that sudden southern curtain and then pulled back like a test run. The storm was passing to the north, leaving us under a lid of cloud that kept the heat down and the light strange. We took the main path back, past plots that had been tended carefully and some that had been allowed to fold into the ground. I realized halfway to the car that my pocket felt heavier. I put my hand in and felt metal, a coin, a quarter that was wet against my palm. I hadn't put anything there. I stopped walking. The quarter had a dark ring around it as if it had sat in water. I showed it to Mia. She frowned, not suspicious of me, but of the fact of it. Then she looked back the way we had come, and I saw the thought pass over her face. She wanted to return it. It seemed small and foolish and yet exactly right. We turned around and went back, quick now because the light had slouched lower and the place was finding the shadows that suited. When we reached the statue, the coins were as we had left them, except now there was no gap. The semicircle was complete. My quarter had taken the missing place. I felt the leftover dampness in my hand and my throat tightened. I told Mia we should go, this time not as a suggestion. She didn't argue. We made it to the lot and found it emptier than it had any right to be. The gate at the lane's mouth had a chain threaded through but not yet locked. A truck idled near the office. Gerald stood with his back to us, talking to a woman I recognized as the one who had told us about closing time the day before. The conversation didn't look polite. Hands moved. The woman glanced at the sky as if to blame it. We drove out and headed back to the city with the feeling you get when you've walked away from an argument that never started. That night in our rental, a faint sound woke me. The room was cool. The street outside was quiet. Mia breathed the slow, careful breath she keeps when she is so deep asleep. You could mow the lawn beside her. The sound came again, soft and unfamiliar inside a room like ours. It was humming. A child humming a simple tune with only a few notes. It sounded like what a music box would try to be if you taught it to be sad. I sat up, the sound stopped. When I lay back down, it started again, almost amused. I swung my feet to the floor and felt a ribbon of cold across my ankles. A draft that moved as if someone had opened a drawer full of winter air. I followed it to the window. The glass was fogged where the air conditioning hit the start of the humid night. On the inside of the fog, a small print had formed. 5 rounded ovals and a palm. I stood with my hand hanging there, not quite brave enough to lay it over the mark. The humming paused like a breath taken at the end of a line. Then it was gone. I didn't wake Mia. I wiped the glass with the heel of my hand and watched the fog grow back like breath on a mirror. In the morning, I told myself it was the neighbor's TV, or my own blood in my ears translated by a brain that wanted the wrong kind of story. We planned to leave Savannah that afternoon, but we had time for breakfast at a place where the biscuits came on plates the size of steering wheels. Mia asked me why I looked like I had slept on a bus bench. I told her. She didn't laugh. She didn't add color or make it bigger the way we sometimes do for each other. She just said we should swing by Bonaventure one more time before we hit the highway. She said it like you tell someone to apologize before the door closes. The day had gone bright and hard. Shadows were crisp as cutouts. The air smelled like someone had wrung it out over a vat of sugar. At the gate, we saw the chain was off and the sign swung to open. We drove in and parked under a patch of shade that would be gone in an hour. As we walked, I kept glancing at the people around us, wanting to borrow some normal from them. A man in a Braves cap took a selfie with a marble lamb. A girl in a black dress wrote in a notebook, her pen moving like she was stitching. A couple in matching shirts used a folded brochure to find an ancestor. All of that ordinary made me feel foolish. When we turned onto the path to Little Gracie's plot, the ordinary thinned out. No one else was on that path. The air cooled by a degree I could feel on my teeth. At the statue, the coins looked dull, as if they had been breathed on by a long mouth. The ribbon had darkened. The thin mark down the cheek was visible and a little wider, with a tiny ridge at the bottom the way a teardrop can collect before it falls. A dragonfly buzzed near my ear and then drifted off like it had been paid to try and failed. Mia said quietly that she wanted to ask a question. She closed her eyes and said it the way you speak to someone you don't want to scare. She asked if the girl was alone. She asked if we should stop coming because we weren't helping. A heat wave shimmer moved along the path. I thought of Jarell telling us to leave the offerings alone. I thought of the humming in the dark. I didn't expect an answer, not a clear one. I didn't get words. I got movement I could not reason away. The statue turned her head. It happened the way a shadow crosses a face when a cloud moves. The chin shifted a fraction. The gaze slanted from straight ahead to a point a little right and low, as if she were keeping her eyes on a child near her feet. Marble should not move. Marble should reflect movement, not make it. My stomach fell like I had missed a step I did not know was there. Mia's hand found my wrist and closed so tight I felt the tick of my pulse under her fingers. Neither of us spoke. The air thickened with the green smell that sometimes rises from wet grass. A coin rolled off the plinth and clinked on the dirt. Not the quarter I had carried. A dime bright as if someone had polished it. It spun longer than a coin has any right to and then fell. And when it fell, the faint humming started again right behind us, and the leaves moved without breeze the way a curtain lifts when someone walks past it. I turned faster than I should have and saw nothing but the path and the open air, and a scrap of ribbon that might have come from a child's hair tie. I wanted to run. My legs felt like I had promised them not to. I leaned close and said a name that I did not know I knew until I said it. The statue did not move again. The mark on the cheek looked ordinary now, old and harmless. A stain you would not notice if you hadn't been staring. I put the dime back where it had been and stepped away with the careful speed you use near a strange dog. On the walk out, we saw Gerald driving his cart toward us. He slowed and looked past us down the path we had just come from. "Storm last night brought the river smell up," he said. "Some days it sticks here." He let the engine buzz a little. "You look like you saw a snake." He meant it as a joke and not. I told him a coin had fallen. He tilted his head, checked that my hands were empty, and said, "Then you put it back." I said yes. He nodded once, satisfied, and then looked at Mia in a way that was not unkind but was heavy. "You keep your questions quiet in places like this," he said. "Leave loud questions for the living. The dead can hear better than we can answer." He put the cart in gear and went on. We left Savannah after lunch, joined the highway stream, and let the city slide into a story behind us. The car smelled faintly of wet stone, which is not a smell cars usually choose. Once we crossed into South Carolina, the smell faded like a thought you can't keep. Several weeks later, back home, I downloaded the photos I did take. None were of the statue. I had 100 pictures of trees and angels and names and the river showing up between things like a witness. I almost deleted them in a batch because they looked like every other set of pictures I take in a place that has been photographed a million times. I didn't. I let them sit until the night I couldn't sleep and wanted to prove to myself that memory was a trick of heat and wish, and the mind's stubborn need to embroider. In one image of the path near her plot, far back and to the left where the depth of field goes soft, there is a small shadow that is the wrong shape for a branch and the wrong shape for a hat. It is the shape of a head at the height of a child, and the line of it is too clean for foliage, and it is turned exactly the way the statue turned. In the corner of the frame, a dime flashes like an eye. I could tell you the file is corrupted, that I overexposed the leaves, that what I see is the pareidolia that people use to explain saints in toast and faces in clouds. I could tell you that. I could tell you about the humming I sometimes hear now in the hallway when I get up for water, how it fades when I step under the attic hatch and comes back when I move away. I could tell you a dime showed up on the dresser with a faint dark ring around it, but we both know that must have been mine, and I must have put it there and forgotten. I could tell you any of this and it would be true the way the facts of a dream are true while you are inside it. I keep a single rule now that I picked up from a man who moves mulch under live oaks. If I walk in a place where the ground is crowded with names and the air keeps the temperature of water even in the dry season, I look down and keep my hands to myself. I don't take what is not offered twice. I don't ask questions out loud anymore. And when I hear humming where there shouldn't be any, I do one other small thing that you can call a habit or a superstition or an apology. I make sure there is always a coin in the house that belongs to no one. I leave it somewhere a child could reach if she were visiting. I find it moved sometimes, a few inches to the right, a few to the left, as if someone is teaching me patience. On good nights I sleep. On the other nights I remember the way a marble head turned without cracking, and the sound a coin makes when it decides to fall. If you go in the daylight with someone who carries kindness in their pockets. Go when the river is low and the air is honest. And when you feel the light shift like a cloud is moving when there is no cloud, say nothing. Step back, let the silence have its room. The dead are not hungry for our wonder. They already have names. They already have all the time they need. I never planned on telling this story. It sounds like one of those late-night exaggerations people post to get attention, and if I was hearing it instead of living it, I'd call it a stitched-together urban legend and move on. But I need to say it out loud, partly to put it somewhere outside my head, and partly because I don't want to be the only one who remembers. What happened the night we stayed too long in St. Louis Cemetery No. 1 was in New Orleans with my cousin Lena and her boyfriend, Matt. We'd saved for the trip all spring, splitting an Airbnb above a bodega on Burgundy Street. The first night we did the tourist loop, beignets, music bleeding out of every doorway on Frenchman, brass bands and people wearing feathered masks even though it was way past any festival. The next morning we did the cemetery tour, the legit daytime one you have to book through a licensed guide because St. Louis No. 1 is gated and only open with an escort now. Our guide was a woman named Rochelle with a sun-bleached hat and a voice that could cut through traffic. She told us about the above-ground tombs, the oven vaults, the way families used to reuse crypts because of the heat. She pointed out the St. Louis family tomb, the Italian Benevolent Society vault, and of course Marie Laveau's site, the one everybody comes for. You'll see triple X marks in the photos, but those are vandalism, Rochelle said, tapping the air with her pen. Don't add to it. Be respectful. If you want to leave an offering, leave something small and harmless. Coins, flowers, a little ribbon. Do not chalk on the stone. People had already left everything you can imagine. Beads, hair ties, lipstick, a tiny bottle of rum sealed with red wax, ticket stubs, even a pack of Newports with one cig missing. I remember the way the sunlight bounced off the white stucco and the smell of wet earth even though everything was above ground. The aisles were narrow and irregular, like a neighborhood that grew without a plan, and the wind made a low humming noise between the walls. Lena has this habit of asking questions that make guides like her. Do people ever hear voices? She asked, not trying to be cute about it. Rochelle gave her a look like she'd heard that one 1,000 times but didn't hate it. People hear a lot of things in a place like this, she said. It's a city of the dead. Folks bring their wishes and their grief and their bad decisions and leave them here. Sometimes the air hums with it. Sometimes it's just wind. Then she added, and sometimes late people report hearing Creole prayers near certain tombs. I tell them to come back during the day if they want to hear it again. We took our pictures and listened to the little stories Rochelle sprinkled in, the kind that make a place stick in your head. Then the tour ended and we rattled back out the gate behind a group from Seattle with matching hats. I thought that was it for cemeteries. The rest of the day was po' boys and a guy named Roosevelt, who sold us cold water out of a red cooler and then made us laugh for 20 minutes straight. It was a good day. That night, around dusk, Lena realized she was missing her grandmother's rosary. It's the one thing she wears under her shirt every single day. Little black beads, nothing fancy, but it was her Nana's, and that's the kind of thing that matters. She tore apart the Airbnb. Matt checked the Uber we took after lunch. Nothing. Then she looked at me with this expression I know too well. It might be back there. I didn't want to be the guy who says no to the person who lost their dead grandmother's rosary. We can try, I said. Matt made a face like he wanted me to say no for him, but he grabbed his keys. The cemetery closes early, around 3 in the afternoon, but the gate was still visible from the street, the black bars taller than any of us. By the time we walked over, the sky was slate blue and there was a line of cabs outside a jazz club a block away. The cemetery itself, behind the gate, looked like a chessboard left out in the rain. A security guy in a folding chair sat by the entrance with a paperback balanced on his belly. Lena did the talking. She explained about the rosary and pointed toward her chest and used her soft voice, the one that gets customer service to bend rules. The guy sighed and shook his head. We closed, baby, he said, not unkindly. Come back tomorrow with your tour. It's really important, she said. I think I dropped it near Marie Laveau's tomb. She said the name like it would help. He narrowed his eyes. And I think you ain't the first to tell me that. He went back to his book. We were backing away, already planning how to come back at dawn, when an older man appeared inside the gate on the path, walking toward us with a ring of keys that looked like a movie prop. He had a baseball cap with sweat stains around the brim and a shirt that said, "Staff" in peeling letters. He glanced at the security guy who shrugged, then at us. 5 minutes, the man said, lifting a finger. You stick close to me. You don't touch nothing. You don't wander. I locked behind me. I swear to you, nobody tipped him. I think he did it because Lena was wringing her hands and he had a daughter somewhere once. He slid a key into the outer gate, and the metal gave a long, complaining groan that echoed against the tombs. The air inside felt instantly cooler, even though the heat of the day still clung to the sidewalks. It smelled like rain that hadn't fallen yet. We stepped in and he locked the gate behind us. That sound, the lock turning, clicked in my chest in a way I did not like. He started walking without a word. We followed. I don't know how to explain the difference between the cemetery by day and by almost night, except that during the day your brain understands shapes as things, and at night, they become ideas. The tombs weren't just boxes anymore. They were silhouettes with edges that leaned in. The paths didn't feel like aisles. They were corridors. Every time the man's keys knocked against his belt, they made a brittle music that covered the softer noises, the way your own breathing covers the sound of someone else's in a dark room. We'll just check the big tomb, he said finally, and I realized he meant Marie Laveau's. People drop things when they stand there with their hands too full of everything they brought. Lena kept saying thank you. Matt kept checking his phone even though service is weird in there. I kept my hands in my pockets so I wouldn't brush against anything. The staff guy. He never told us his name, and that will bother me until I die. Cut through 2 narrower lanes and led us into the little square where the famous tomb sits. I know you've seen pictures of it. In person at that hour, it felt like standing next to a refrigerator that holds a family's entire history. The offerings were still there from the tour. Coins, ribbons, a little folded note tucked under a stone, candles with unlit wicks. I scanned the dirt along the base, the crack between the walkway and the tomb, the crumbling edge where a tiny fern had managed to grow. No rosary. Lena got on her knees and reached her fingers into the crack, touching around gently like she was feeling under a couch. The staff guy sighed like he wished he'd said no. Something clinked to our left. Not a big sound. It was the clean noise of a coin hitting stone and skipping once. The 4 of us turned our heads at the same time. The coin had landed 6 feet away near a different crypt, not the famous one. It wobbled on its edge and settled tails up. I don't know coins well enough to tell you which one, but it wasn't a penny. It looked heavier. Matt said, "Did you drop?" and cut himself off because none of us had been over there. There wasn't a breeze. The alley was too tight for a bird to have knocked something loose. The staff guy was looking everywhere except at the coin. Lena picked it up. "It's foreign," she said, squinting. "French?" Then she looked right at me. "I don't think it was on the ground. I think it came from there." She pointed toward a niche in the wall of an older vault where an offering plate held 3 other coins and a small shell. The plate looked undisturbed. "Leave that," the man said. Not rude, but firm. "Don't take nothing and don't move nothing around." Lena set the coin on the top step by the famous tomb, like she had to give it back to someplace. "I'm sorry," she said, and I couldn't tell who she was talking to. She twisted her empty chain in her fingers. We looked for the rosary for 2 more minutes, swept our phone flashlights across the ground, and I swear it felt like we were searching the same patch of dirt again and again. The man said, "Okay, that's enough," and turned to lead us back out. He stopped after 2 steps. The path we'd come down looked darker than it should have been, like a movie where the background is a matte painting. He frowned, took a different turn, and we followed single file. Have you ever been in a place that you know is small, but it starts to feel bigger with every step? That happened. I started to recognize the same broken corner of a vault from another angle. A little ceramic angel with 1 wing smiled at us for the 2nd time. We weren't walking in circles, not exactly. We were moving forward through a maze that kept shifting a half foot every time we blinked. The sky above us thinned from slate to the deep blue that means night is already here. You just haven't admitted it. Somewhere behind us, behind 2 walls maybe, we heard voices. Not loud, not speaking to us. It was a rhythm before it was language, the kind of sound that people make when they know the words so well they don't think about them anymore. It was close enough that I could tell it wasn't coming from the street, and far enough that if I turned around and ran toward it, I'd be running for a while. I don't speak Creole, and I couldn't tell you a single word of what I heard, but every hair on my arm stood up. It wasn't singing. It wasn't exactly praying. It was the sound of many people saying the same thing at once in a place where you aren't supposed to be after dark. Lena reached for my arm without looking at me. "Do you hear that?" The staff guy did not answer. He walked faster. His keys tapped his thigh more urgently. We passed a tomb with an iron gate, and inside was a jar with hydrangeas that looked fresh enough to drink rainwater, if they ever got any. The chanting, if that's what you want to call it, didn't get louder, but it didn't fade either. It followed the same distance behind us no matter which path we took. We came to a wider intersection where 4 aisles met. The man hesitated for the first time, then took the left. I noticed a dark handprint on the wall next to us. It was the color of wet clay. 5 fingers spread like someone had pressed their palm flat against the whitewash. It wasn't graffiti and it wasn't years old. It looked like it would leave residue on your skin if you touched it. We turned and there was another handprint. Smaller. The shape was a little different. Like a child's fingers splayed and pressed twice, one on top of the other. Matt raised the flashlight beam without meaning to and caught a third on a vault door. 2 hands side by side at about the height of a face. "Who?" he started. And then the beam stuttered because his hand was shaking. "Almost there," the man said, but his voice was thinner. We took another left. There was a cat. I know that doesn't sound important, but I need you to picture it exactly. It sat in the middle of the path with its tail wrapped around its feet. It was the color of smoke. Neither black nor gray nor brown, but the kind of color you can't describe when you try later. Its eyes were the pale green you only see in bottles. It watched us without moving. The man clapped his hands twice without sound, and the cat didn't blink. We waited for it to move. It didn't. The man cleared his throat and took a right instead. The cat turned its head to follow us. I have never felt an animal look at me like that. Not curious.
Not afraid.
Calculating, the way you imagine a person in a doorway thinking, "You're not supposed to be here." We reached a stretch where the tombs pulled back a little and the sky opened. I felt for a second the faintest wash of relief, like that patch of ground was less claimed. And then the man stopped and swore under his breath. There were 2 gates. I don't know if I mean there were 2 or 1 in its reflection or one where there shouldn't be any. One was the actual gate we'd come in, the heavy bars and the street visible beyond. The other was a smaller ironwork arch that stood not at the boundary of the cemetery but inside it, leading nowhere, like someone had built a doorway just to make a point. The arch had words across the top that I couldn't make out because my brain kept rewriting them. My flashlight landed on a ring where a lock would go, and I saw that something like wax had been smeared there once and something like wax had dripped. The chanting was the same distance away. "We go to the main gate," the man said, as if there were choices. He took 2 steps and stopped again. The main gate, the real one, was closed, which was expected, but there was something else. On the inside of the bars, like someone had reached through and marked it from the street side, there were handprints, dozens. All at once you could see the difference. These weren't smears. They were clear and deliberate, each the size of a grown person's hand. 5 fingers, palms flat, as if everyone who came to visit had leaned both hands into the bars for a second before turning away. I could see the lines where the lifelines would be if these were inked prints on paper. They weren't wet. They were darker than the metal, a matte shadow that didn't catch the light. The man took out his keys and found the one from earlier. He fit it and tried to turn. It turned. The lock clicked. The gate did not open. It wasn't the kind of not opening where the bolt sticks and you pull harder. It was the kind where something on the other side you can't see is holding it shut with a hand that doesn't get tired. "Did we lock it wrong?" Lena asked, too calm. The man did not answer. The chanting, if I must call it that, slowed down. Not like a recording. More like a crowd listens to itself and chooses a new pace. It settled into a cadence that made the hair behind my ears prickle. If it was a language, it was a comfort for the people saying it. There was no anger in it. That made it worse. "Okay," the man said, and he did a thing that made him feel like a human being again. He swallowed, reset his shoulders, and said as if to kids after a thunderclap, "Back the way we came. There's another exit on Basin." We turned. The cat was there again. It hadn't followed us. It was just there at the edge of the light, tail around its feet. It made a sound like a breath in and then padded away before the beam could settle on it. We followed. Not because we wanted to follow a cat, but because that direction was an option and anything else felt like admitting we were stuck. We walked. We turned. We passed the hydrangeas a second time, which didn't make sense. We passed a vault with a mask spray painted on the side, white face, black eyes, then passed it again later from another angle. We never passed the famous tomb again, which I would have welcomed. The sky was purple and then black, and then impossibly there was enough light to see everything. It wasn't coming from above. It was coming from the air itself, like mist can sometimes throw its own glow. Our flashlights were on, but they weren't doing anything. The light showed us straight lines, and the lines did not agree about where they led. And then the handprints started coming. Not from one tomb, not like in horror movies where there's a single wall and the hands push out like something's trapped and trying to get to you. This was the opposite. The prints appeared on the surfaces around us one after another, some overlapping, some small enough to be a kid's, some large and square. They did not bloom or bleed. They were there, the way your reflection is there when you face glass. We didn't see a single one form. We looked at blank stone and then we looked again and there was a handprint, flat and dark, and then another to the left and another higher. They were at shoulder height and ankle height and way above anyone's head. Lena made a sound I've never heard from her before, like all the air left her body at once. Matt started to say my name and then he didn't, and then he said, "She's not okay." And I turned and saw Lena lean into the wall with both hands like she was asking it for help. Her fingers slid down, leaving nothing behind, and then she went limp, folded, and I was too slow to catch her head. It didn't hit hard, I swear. I was already holding her shoulder. But for a second her eyes rolled white, and I felt that animal panic you only get in hospitals and underwater. The chanting stopped. The silence had weight. It was like the air said, "Now you." I looked at the man because he was the one who had keys and wore the shirt that said staff like it mattered anywhere besides the gate. He wasn't looking at me. He had stepped one pace ahead and tilted his head like he was listening to instructions, like he recognized a voice he hadn't heard in years and it was loud enough to drown us out. "Okay," he said to no one I could see. "Okay." He turned back and crouched next to Lena. "Ma'am," he said, and his voice was gentle in a way that made me want to cry. "You ever leave anything for her before?" "My rosary," Lena said, coming back like she'd fallen under 2 feet of water and someone had pulled her up. She sat up and blinked. "I'm sorry. Everything went cold." "You took it off?" he asked. "No," she said. "It fell off, somewhere." The man nodded like that was an answer he recognized from other nights. He dug into his pocket and pulled out a small square of cloth, the kind of thing a dad carries instead of a handkerchief, because he got into the habit in the 90s. He pressed it into Lena's hand. "Hold on to that. What is it?" "Clean," he said. "Something clean." He stood and looked at me and Matt. "You got anything you can leave that won't take you apart to lose?" Matt fumbled with his fingers like the question itself made no sense. I reached into my pocket and came up with the only thing that wasn't a phone or a room key. A guitar pick I have carried since I was 19. Thin celluloid, blue with a little chip at the top where my thumbnail bit it one night during a set. I keep it for luck even though I barely play anymore. It isn't worth anything. It is worth everything. I felt a childish stubbornness rise in me, like a kid being told to hand over his favorite toy. I almost said no. Then I saw Lena's face. "Okay," I said. "Yeah." I held it out and my hand shook. Matt dug out a Metro card from another city, the one he shows people to tell stories about living somewhere else for 2 years. He held it. His hand did not move. He looked like it weighed 10 pounds. Then he set it on his palm and nodded once like he was agreeing with himself. "Okay." "This way," the man said. We did not go toward the gates. We went the other way, deeper into it. If you are the kind of person who is already sliding your thumb to scroll past this, thinking we were the stupid characters in a story, you would have done the same thing. Because when he turned, the air eased by 1/2 degree and my lungs loosened just enough to think. If we had gone toward the gates, I believe something would have pressed its hand flat against my chest in a way I could not bear. We came to a tiny square I hadn't noticed during the day, a place where 4 tombs faced each other so close you could touch all of them without stepping. There was a stone shelf in the corner, not part of any vault, just a built-in ledge that might have been for flowers once. The man nodded at it. "Set them there," he said. We did. Matt placed his Metro card like he was filing a paper. I set the pick down and it stuck for a second, like the stone had a skin. Lena, still on one knee, took the square of cloth in her fist and looked at me, confused, like she had to give something too but had nothing left. Then she reached under the collar of her shirt and pulled out the empty chain. The little clasp snapped back together without anything on it, and laid it between our things. It looked too small to matter. We stepped back. Nothing dramatic happened. No wind, no lights, no voice speaking our names from inside our heads. What I felt was the same feeling you get when a room stops smelling like bleach after a while, because your nose gives up. The pressure lifted by a degree. The handprints around the square were still there, flat and dark, but I could look at them without my heart stuttering between beats. Somewhere further in, the cat yawned. The man let out a breath through his nose, and that seemed to matter. "We go to Bassin," he said again, but this time it sounded less like he was promising and more like he was reporting. We followed him. He took 2 turns I swear didn't exist when we came in. We passed the hydrangeas one more time, and I did not want to hold that in my head. The way certain things do not obey map logic. At the Basin Street gate, he did the same ritual with the keys and the lock, and this time when the mechanism clicked, the gate gave a fraction instead of nothing, and then it gave more. It opened with a reluctant squeal that made me wish it would stop so nothing would hear. He stepped through backwards, holding the bars as if to keep them open with his hands if the lock changed its mind. We stumbled out onto the sidewalk like people getting off a boat. The street was not empty. That saved us. A bus sighed at the curb as it let 3 people off. A bike went by with a speaker strapped to the back playing a song I knew. Someone on the corner laughed too loud and then covered their mouth like they weren't supposed to be having that good a time on a Monday. The world did not match what was behind us, and the mismatch was a relief. The man locked the gate and looked at us through the bars. His face had lines I don't remember seeing before. "Don't come back after dark," he said, and it was not a scold. It was a prayer. Lena said, "Thank you." She sounded small. He nodded, and for a second he looked like he wanted to say something else. Like he wanted to ask us for something or hand us a warning he didn't know how to wrap. Then he turned and walked back into the aisles. He did not look back. We got back to the Airbnb without talking much. Matt poured 3 shots of the cheapest whiskey in the cabinet and we didn't drink them. We just let our hands close around the glasses like that would warm us. When Lena went to wash her face, she made a sound in the bathroom and I came running because I will die running to that sound. She was standing in front of the mirror with water on her cheeks like she'd splashed herself and then forgot why. On the fogged surface of the mirror, where you can usually write a heart with your finger and it will look like a message from a ghost, there were 2 handprints. Not ours, too big, too long in the fingers. They were not wet. They were not drawn. They were just there, pale where the fog hadn't settled, like the mirror remembered the shape of a hand from another time and kept it separate. We wiped the glass with a towel and the prints did not come back. We went to bed and none of us slept. In the morning, the city was loud and bright and everything that had happened felt like we had been drugged inside a story. We went back to the cemetery with the day tour we'd booked, because that was the plan and we were not going to be the kind of people who let a feeling change the plan. Rochelle was our guide again, a coincidence we tried not to look too closely at. She nodded at us like she recognized our faces and turned to the group. She gave the same talk about respect and offerings and not chalking up the stone. When we reached the famous tomb, there were more coins, a small braid of hair tied with a red thread, a cigarette with a smear of lipstick on the filter. We stood at the back, not looking at each other. Then Lena touched my elbow hard. Not a squeeze, a grip. The guitar pick was on the step. I don't mean a pick like mine, I mean mine. The chip at the top. The tiny notch where a friend once tried to bite it out of my hand as a joke and left the faintest crescent. I picked it up like it might be hot. The edge was cool and a little rough where the celluloid had worn. I wanted to cry in front of a group of strangers who paid $40 each to hear a history lesson. Matt didn't say anything. He walked around to the left like he was giving himself an excuse to look at something else. He stopped, he bent. He picked up a card. He turned it over. He held it up for me to see. MetroCard, blue and yellow. The date on the back was the year he lived in Queens. He laughed once, the kind of laugh that breaks in the middle and turns into breath. He slid it into his wallet without asking the heir permission. Lena did not find her rosary. The staff guy wasn't around. Rochelle kept the group moving with the practiced rhythm of someone who knows that if you linger in one spot too long, the tourists will drift toward superstition like moths to a window. We walked. We listened to names and dates and facts. We stood at the Basin Gate with the others as Rochelle finished her talk, the bit about how this city takes care of its dead. When she opened the gate, the world outside matched the world inside, and for a second I almost believed in stitch lines. We dispersed into the heat like a school of fish. We tried to have a normal trip after that. We ate crawfish until our lips burned, and Matt fell in love with a low-ceilinged bar that had a jukebox older than my mother. We danced badly in a room full of people who were too kind to tell us to stop. We made the mistake of asking a man at a corner store if he sold chalk, and he said no, and looked at us like he hoped we didn't need any. We slept with a light on without admitting it. The night we flew out, I stood on the balcony of the Airbnb with the sounds of the neighborhood finding each other. Someone whistling, a dog, the high clack of a heel on broken sidewalk. I was turning the pick over in my fingers like a worry stone. I said thank you out loud to no one, because that is the least a person should do when they leave part of themselves in a place and get it back. Behind me, from the open door where the bathroom was, I heard a click. Like a chain clasp closing. I didn't go check. I am not the person in a horror movie who walks toward the sound he knows will become a story. I stood outside until someone down the block called someone else Cher, soft and affectionate, and the air felt like it belonged to us again. When we got home, Lena called her mom. She confessed about the cemetery. She asked about the rosary. Her mom said she'd look. The next day, she sent a picture. The rosary was on the dresser in Lena's childhood bedroom, where she puts on jewelry when she visits. It was coiled the way a snake coils itself to sleep, not tangled, not dropped. The clasp was closed. There was dust on the beads like it had been there for a while. That made no sense. Lena had worn it in New Orleans. I had seen it. She doesn't wear it now. She keeps it in a box with a small round of white cloth folded on top of it, a square that looks like a handkerchief but isn't. I asked where she got the cloth, and she said she didn't want to talk about it, and I understood that the conversation was over. Sometimes, if we're sitting quietly and the TV is on and someone on the screen says New Orleans, she reaches up without noticing and touches her throat, making sure the chain is not there. There is one more thing. I don't know what to do with it, so I'll put it here. A week after we got home, I had to change a tire on my car. It was hot, that kind of parking lot heat that makes everything smell like rubber, and I was already mad. I jacked the car up and was crouched and sweating and thinking mean thoughts about the universe. And then I heard it. Someone humming under their breath, the way my grandmother used to hum when she cooked. I looked up. There was no one there. The sound wasn't music. It was a pattern, a comfort, and it filled the air the way the chanting had filled those narrow aisles, except it didn't make me want to run. It made me hold still. It was 3 beats and then a pause and then 3 beats again, like people tapping on a table in agreement. I finished the tire. I got in the car. I closed the door. The humming stopped. On the passenger seat was a coin I had not put there. It was heavy and dull, and I could not read it. I held it between my fingers and felt something like gratitude and something like warning sharing the same chair. That coin lives on my dresser now. I do not carry it around. I do not put it with the pick. I do not test it. I do not ask it questions like the idiots in those stories you hear, where they go back to the haunted place with better cameras. At night sometimes, if the house is too quiet and the air feels thick, I catch myself listening for the sound of many people saying the same thing at once. Words that were never mine to understand. I don't hear it. Instead, the room adjusts itself around me like a city settling after a heavy rain, and I sleep. If you go to St. Louis #1, go with the sun on your shoulders and a guide who knows how to walk you out. Don't take what's not yours, and don't add your name to a wall in a place where names matter. If you find yourself inside after someone has locked the gate, remember that there are rules there that don't have signs to read. If something is asked of you, give the smallest honest thing you can bear to lose. It might be the exact size of what's owed. And if you hear people speaking softly behind the walls and it sounds like comfort, understand that not all comfort is for you. Some of it is meant to keep other people where they are. Some of it is meant to let them know you'll leave the way you came. We did, mostly. The rest I'm still figuring out. I keep the pick in my pocket like I used to. It's chipped and smooth and ordinary. When I'm nervous, I rub my thumb over the edge. One night, months later, at a bar where a friend dragged me to hear a guy in a Saints cap play blues, I realized the pick felt warm, warmer than my hand could make it. I pulled it out, and there, just for a breath, where the celluloid thins at the top, were 5 faint arcs the size of my own fingers, like I'd been holding someone else's hand and didn't notice until then. I blinked. It was just a pick again. When the song ended, the guy on stage said something in a voice that cut through the room and I didn't catch the words, but the cadence was familiar. It turned in my chest like a key. I put the pick back in my pocket and went home, walking the long way on purpose. I don't take shortcuts through places that narrow anymore. I don't press my hands against cool stone when I'm tired. And when I pass a gate with bars higher than a person, I don't grip them, not even to look through. I keep my hands at my sides. I keep moving. I say thank you without being asked. I leave things where I found them, and when something precious goes missing, I try for a minute to believe it isn't lost at all, just visiting somewhere it remembers, where a voice in a language I don't speak is saying that a debt has been paid, and if we don't understand the terms, that's fine. We don't need to. We just need to go. I still drive Archer Avenue some nights because the money's good and I'm stubborn, but I don't pick up anyone there anymore. If you know the stretch I'm talking about, it runs past Resurrection Cemetery in Justice, Illinois, then threads toward the old bridge and the low-slung neighborhoods where the streetlights throw more shadow than light. I run produce from a cold warehouse in Joliet to a distributor by Midway, usually a quick turn, load, roll, unload, repeat. The night this happened, it was late October, cold enough that my breath fogged the inside of the windshield when I shut the heat off. It had just rained, and that blacktop shine made every light smear like watery paint. I'm a trucker, nothing glamorous. 37, divorced, sober, and down to a short list of people who still answer my calls. There were a few of us working that night. Me, Ron, who drives a battered Peterbilt and swears at the GPS like it's a person, and Tino, our overnight dispatcher who keeps us moving with coffee and sarcasm from behind a cracked monitor. I started rolling a little after midnight. The yard dog shoved the palletized lettuce to the nose of my trailer, signed the paper with thick fingers, and smacked my door. "Get out of here, Evan," he said. "Bears in the morning." "Copy that," I said, though I'm a White Sox guy and everybody knows it. I pulled onto I-55, then peeled off to Archer. A little fog hung over the Des Plaines River lowlands like the breath of the city. CB chatter was dead. My radio was playing quietly, some AM station where a woman with a warm voice took dedications from insomniacs. I tell you all this because nothing felt wrong, not at first. Ordinary nights are a blessing in this job. Quiet is a blessing. But I started noticing things on Archer that didn't fit. The first was the smell. Windows up, heat on, everything sealed, yet I caught this damp green smell like a basement after a flood. Not swampy like summer, but clean and cold like a river. It hit, faded, then hit again when I passed a storm-drained coughing mist. The second thing was the music. The station cut mid-sentence, fizzled, and then I had a band in my cab that shouldn't have been on the airwaves in 2025. A big band number, bright trumpets, a clarinet that trilled like laughter, and this sense of a room with a wooden floor. My mind built that room by itself like I was remembering it. People in pressed clothes spinning under warm bulbs. The announcer came on after the song with a voice held together by cigarettes and charm. "And that's from our friends tonight at the Willowbrook Ballroom," he said. "Bring your best girl. 2 bits gets you in the door. Willowbrook burned nearly a decade ago. I know that because I used to take my ex past it on Sunday afternoons for pie in the diner nearby, which was a mistake because she wanted more than pie from me back then, and I had nothing to give." I smacked the radio with the heel of my hand, and the music snapped back to the night host in real time, like a rubber band returning to shape. She didn't seem to have noticed the interruption. I drove past the cemetery gates and did what I always do. I didn't look directly at them. You catch enough funeral processions on the road and cemeteries stop being romantic places. They're just dark rectangles where families go to put words on stones and talk to what isn't there. The iron of those gates is heavy and old. People say you can still see handprints burned into them from some girl who grabbed the bars trying to get back in. I don't know if that's true. I've never gotten out to check. "Evan, what's your 20? Tino crackled. I pressed the mic. "Archer, just past Roberts." "Copy." "Ron's about 5 minutes ahead. He says watch the red at Harlem's acting weird long cycle." "Got it." I rolled up on a red light. Nobody behind me, nobody in the intersection. To my right was a shuttered auto body shop. To my left, a row of bare trees that looked like ink drawings. The smell of water was strong enough now that I checked the floor mats, half expecting to see a leak. They were dry. I was thinking about nothing at all, really, when she stepped out of the dark and into the wash of my headlights. She was just a figure at first. Then the light caught her dress. White, knee-length, a kind of old-fashioned cut like something my grandmother wore in photos. A little shine to the fabric like it had been damp for a long time and never fully dried. Pale legs bare, hair that might have been blonde or brown, plastered to her head as if it had been combed with fingers. She wasn't looking at me. She was looking past me, down Archer, the way you look when you already know the answer to a question someone hasn't asked. I should say I don't pick people up. I have a million reasons not to. Company policy, liability, the simple truth that an occupied passenger seat means a story I might not be able to drive out of. And I didn't pick her up, not then. I did what any city driver does. I flicked my brights twice, a polite, "Are you okay?" She moved closer, her dress catching on the air of my passing fan like a small flag. When she got close enough that I could see the line of her collarbone and the shadows under her eyes, she lifted a hand. It wasn't a hitchhiker's thumb. It wasn't begging. It was a simple raise, like a dance partner asking a question and waiting for your palm. I tapped the horn. She didn't flinch. The light turned green. I didn't move. Something in the way she stood made it feel like my truck was already in motion around her. Like the night had picked a path for us and all I had to do was let it. "Evan?" Tino asked. "You stopped at Harlem?" "Yeah," I said. "Got a pedestrian in the road." "Chicago," he said, and I knew he was rolling his eyes. "You want me to call it in?" "No." I don't know why I said that. "She's fine." I leaned over and popped the passenger door. It's muscle memory by now. The reach past the seat to flick the manual lock. The cold came in like a hand pushing me back into my chair. She stepped on the grab handle like she'd done it before, swung one leg up, then the other, and folded herself into the seat. The smell of river water was so strong I tasted it. She didn't look at me when she settled. She looked straight ahead, hands flat on her knees, wet dark hair leaving half moons on her shoulders. "Where to?" I asked, my voice higher than I wanted it to be. "Home," she said. "There's a million details that matter when someone you didn't mean to pick up sits down. The way her dress wrinkled with water. The line of mud on her calves like she'd waded through weeds. Her lips were not blue. Her skin wasn't corpse pale. If you saw her in daylight, you'd say, that girl needs a towel. You wouldn't run." Her voice had a Chicago vowel in it, soft and slanted. "Where's home?" I asked. "Up ahead," she said. And then, like she'd changed her mind about the order of the evening, "I went dancing." "Where?" She tilted her head like she could hear something I couldn't. "You know." I could feel my heartbeat and my fingers on the wheel. I put the truck in gear. Green light again. The cab thumped as we rolled over a seam in the pavement. The seat beside me was soaked in a way that didn't make sense. It wasn't a spill. It was as if water seeped through the fabric itself. I could see it darkening in a slow tide that had its own mind. She kept her hands still on her knees. No dripping. No pooled water in her lap. Just the seat darkening like it was remembering something. I found my voice for practicalities. "You need a hospital?" She shook her head. I told him I would get home. He didn't listen. Who didn't? She said nothing. The next red light caught us at Roberts. I put my foot on the brake. She turned in the seat then, finally, and looked at me. Her eyes were not dramatic. They were tired in a way that people get when they've been arguing all night and just want to sleep in their own bed. "Don't stop," she said. "It's a red." "Don't stop," she said again. And her voice had a kind of echo to it, like the room we were in wasn't just my cab. "I don't blow reds. I don't test them. You do this job long enough and you know which rules bend and which ones will get your paycheck stapled to a memorial." That night I eased forward like an old man easing into a cold pool. Nobody was coming. The intersection was empty. I coasted through. Halfway across, the passenger seat went cold in a way I've never felt before or since. Not chilly, not air conditioner on your shins. It was the cold you get stepping off a summer dock into a river that still remembers the spring melt. I glanced over. The seat was empty. The seatbelt was still crossed, latched. The fabric was soaked enough that when I shifted my weight, I heard it squelch. I didn't see a door open. I didn't see anyone on the roadway. The cold lasted exactly as long as it took for me to breathe in and out twice. Then it was just the night again. The heater whispering. The radio low. "Evan," Tino said, "you blow that light?" I had the arrow, I lied. My mouth was dry as dust. "You ever hear of Resurrection Mary?" He swore. "Man, why would you say her name on the radio? You trying to scare the hell out of me?" I'm serious, I said. So am I, he said, and then static covered whatever else he might have added. I didn't go to the cemetery. I didn't do the movie thing and pull a U-turn for the gates. I did my job because that's what gets you through the night. I rolled to the warehouse, backed into the dock on the second try, and let a kid named Hector pull my pallets while he hummed. He climbed into my cab to hand me the clipboard. He froze with one boot on the step, sniffed and wrinkled his nose. "You spill something?" he asked, and then looked at the passenger seat. "Dude." We both stared at the wet seat for a second, like it might explain itself if we gave it time. Hector handed me the pen by holding it out as far from his body as he could. I signed. He clapped the truck door and said nothing else. On the drive back, Archer felt longer, like the city had unrolled extra blocks while I wasn't looking. The radio kept slipping into that old big band world for a second at a time, then correcting, as if someone were flipping between realities with a coin toss. I passed the cemetery again because Archer is Archer, and that's the way home. The left gate was ajar 3 inches. I have never seen those gates anything but shut at night. That's probably nothing. Locks break, groundskeepers forget. But it didn't look forgotten. It looked like a hand had pulled it enough to slip through and then changed its mind. I pulled into the Red Gate Diner because my hands were shaking, and they make a decent pie even at 2 in the morning. The diner sits in that limbo of suburbs where every neon sign has been there since before you were born. The waitress on nights is a woman named Jo, who has a tattoo of a sparrow on her wrist and a voice that can kick a man out at 3 paces. She took one look at me and said, "If you're here to tell me you saw a girl in white again, you order first." That common? She poured coffee that tasted like the pot and said, "Once the leaves fall, I get 2 a week." She glanced behind me like she expected to see someone come in. "She leave anything?" "Seat's wet." Joe's mouth did a tight line thing. "Don't go back the same way." "That's my way, find another." "I can't," I said. "Job." "I had a job once too," she said, "and I quit it when it tried to kill me." She set a slice of apple pie on the counter without asking. She leaned in like she was telling me how to sneak out of a bad marriage. "When you hit the light by the cemetery, don't look at the mirrors. If she talks again, you don't answer. And if you hear music, you keep moving until you can't hear it anymore." "I didn't tell you about the music, you didn't have to," she said. And then a busboy dropped a tray and she spun away with a "watch it, baby," and a clap for the kid to pick it up and try again. Ron came in while I was forcing the pie down. He slapped my shoulder heavy and sat. "You look like a man who ate a lemon rind," he said. "You see her?" "I think so." He jerked his chin toward the window. "I seen her 3 times. Twice in winter, once in May after a rain. She's calmer in winter. In May, she chatters like she has a list and she's running down it. Left a footprint on my floor mat, barefoot. Heel like a baby's, the little arch, then a smear like she slid." "Why do you keep driving past there?" I asked. He grinned, but there wasn't humor in it. "Because it's where the road goes." On the way back, I did what Joe said not to. I watched the mirrors. You don't realize how much you rely on them until someone tells you you can't. Your world goes narrow. Every engine sound behind you sounds like a threat. I passed the gates and I looked. Because I'm not a wise man after midnight, she wasn't in the mirror. She was in the seat next to me. No door sound. No cold this time, not first. Just the wet, the sense of it traveling into the seat like a stain rising through cloth. I kept my eyes on the road and felt the presence of someone who wasn't there and absolutely was. The radio found that old ballroom again and steadied there. The announcer's voice was distant and then became the room itself. People were clapping in time. A woman laughed in my ear and I flinched because I could smell her hairspray. "That old kind your grandmother kept in bulbous cans. You came back," she said. "I have to," I said, and then remembered Joe and bit my tongue, tasting blood. She put her hand on my forearm. It wasn't cold. It wasn't warm either. It was like being touched by shade. "He said he would take me home," she said. "He said it didn't matter about the light." "What light?" I asked before I could stop myself. She nodded toward the intersection ahead. Red pooled on wet pavement like a wound. "That one." I eased off the gas. The music swelled, then blurred. Then was a single violin scraping a note so high my teeth ached. Something banged in the back of my trailer like a pallet had shifted. Though I knew every strap was set, the smell of water doubled, trebled until it felt like my lungs were filling with river air. "Don't stop," she said, and now her hand tightened. It was strong. "Don't stop, don't stop, don't!" The light turned green. Not yellow, not a blink, just a clean green like someone had thrown a switch. I didn't trust it. I crept into the intersection like I expected a freight train. A car shot across from my right. A compact Honda doing 45, its driver's face lit ghostly by their phone. Their eyes nowhere near the road. If I'd gone on the red like she wanted, I would have met that driver nose to nose. If I'd slammed the brakes on the sudden green, the Honda would have taken my door off. As it was, I rolled through on a breath and a prayer and watched their tail lights fishtail in the wet and disappear. "Thank you," I said, without knowing who I meant. The seat beside me exhaled cold. I looked anyway. The seatbelt lay flat and unlatched. Water gathered at the low point of the cushion, and then disappeared like it was being pulled down from beneath. For a second I saw something impossible. Not a face or a hand, but a movement in the fabric like fingers pressing up from underneath, as if the seat were a thin ice skin over a deeper thing. Then it was just cloth again, dark and quiet. I didn't go home. I drove to the Justice Police substation and parked illegally in a lined space and walked in smelling like river. The officer at the desk was an older man with a Cubs mug and bags under his eyes. He looked at me the way people look at someone who's about to tell a story they've heard 100 times. "Let me guess," he said. "You picked her up, she vanished, your seat's wet." "Yeah," I said. I put both hands on the counter so they wouldn't shake. "Look, I know. You wouldn't believe how many drivers come through here October through January." He gestured behind him to a bulletin board. It was mostly notices about trunk or treats and a flyer for a canned food drive. In the corner, tucked under a thumbtack, was a small Polaroid of the cemetery gates, and someone, I'm guessing the officer, had circled a spot on the iron with a red pen. "My dad used to do this job," he said. "He figured if you sat quiet and let them talk, they'd go home calmer. Nothing to report, nothing to write up. You want a cup of coffee? I can tell you not to drive Archer, but I can't escort you anywhere else." "Did your dad ever see her?" The officer looked at me for a long time. He says once, "Night my brother was born. Mom got stuck at her sister's, he couldn't leave the desk, and he left for 5 minutes to take a walk. Came back white as Christmas. Never talked about it. My aunt said he smelled like a lake dipped him." He lifted his mug. "You want coffee or not?" I drank bitter police coffee and sat with my back to a window because I didn't want to look out and see anybody standing under the orange streetlight. The officer wrote nothing down. He told me about high school kids who dared each other to leave roses on the gates, about a man who took a photo and got a blur that looked like a swirl of dress, about a woman who refused to sit at lights for 10 years after her night and died quietly in her chair at 87 anyway. So maybe the road doesn't get to choose after all. I left before dawn because the day drivers were coming. The sky had that city gray that's neither night nor morning. I drove home with the seat heater on full and a towel over the passenger side that soaked through and needed wringing in my sink like I'd pulled it out of a lake. I slept badly. I dreamed of a wooden dance floor and men's shoes, the polished kind, stepping around a dark spot where something had spilled and nobody wanted to slip. The next week, I found something tucked into my visor. I don't know how long it had been there. My truck gets cleaned, but nobody goes through my personal stuff. It was a photo. One of those strips you get from a booth, except it was only one frame cut from the others with scissors. A girl in a light dress smiling too shy to show teeth. A boy beside her, face half in shadow, the old kind of pomaded hair, ears a little too big for his head. The background was a fake curtain. They were leaning into each other like the person who took the photo had told them to do it, and they were embarrassed. On the white border, someone had written home in pencil. The G in the corner where a date should be was smeared. I put the photo in my glove box and taped it shut because I didn't want to see it when I opened it for napkins. A week later, it was on my seat when I got in, sitting there like a cat that had found the warm spot while I was gone. I didn't tape the box again. I put the photo face down and drove past the cemetery with my eyes on the next light. You want to know what I think? I think if she was angry, I would be. If she wanted vengeance, I'd feel that throb in my foot every time I hit the brake. That's not what I get. I get the sense of an argument that never got finished and a promise that felt like a plan, until the night cut it shorter than anyone meant. I get the music sometimes, just for a second between stations. I get water where water has no right to be. I get a hand that isn't cold, pressed to my arm when I'm too stubborn about a red light. And sometimes, when Archer is empty and Chicago is pretending to be a small town and the sky is low and heavy like a hand on your head, I get the feeling there's someone sitting beside me who thinks I am someone else, and I am trying very hard not to break her heart again. Last week I was coming home from a late drop. The leaves have started to go. The wind pushes them into eddies that fill the gutters and then collapse. I rolled past the gates with the radio low and no chatter on the CB. The red at Harlem was long, and I had time to look at my face reflected faintly in the side window. Behind my own eyes, I saw something move in the sleeper, a shift in the gloom, like someone sitting up from a nap. I turned fast, and there was nothing back there but my jacket and the shape of my pillow. The seat beside me creaked like someone had just settled their weight. I didn't move. I kept my hands at 10 and 2 like a student driver. The light held red. My breath fogged the glass. The smell of river water came and went, soft as a woman's perfume when she passes you and is gone again before you can name it. The seatbelt on the passenger side tilted and clicked home, all by itself, with that familiar little plastic tongue-in-groove sound. The light turned green. The seat was empty. The belt lay flat like it always had. I drove on. The photo in my glove box felt heavier than paper, so yeah. I picked up a girl on Archer and she got out at a red light that wasn't red anymore. The seat was soaked like it had been lowered into the day planes and brought up again. I'm not trying to convince you of anything. You don't know me and I don't know you. I'm telling you because keeping it in my mouth alone feels like drowning. If you drive that avenue and a girl in white lifts her hand, you do what you're going to do. Me, I keep the door locked and my eyes on the road. But sometimes when the timing's wrong and the night's too quiet, the lock doesn't mean much. Sometimes I get a hand on my arm, a voice in my ear telling me not to stop, and a song steps into my cab from a ballroom that burned down years ago and refuses to admit it. When the light changes, she's gone. Usually. If you ever catch me at the Red Gate Diner after 2 in the morning, I'll buy your coffee if you'll sit with your back to the window. And if you get back in your car and there's a damp towel on the passenger seat that you don't remember leaving, don't bring it back in to return it. Keep it, dry it, fold it. Make a little space in the glove box for a picture you didn't take. It doesn't mean anything. It doesn't mean everything. It just means that some promises last longer than the road, and some people go on trying to get home even after they don't need a ride anymore. I took the graveyard shift at Hollywood Forever because it sounded cleaner than the other options. The security company offered me a choice between a downtown parking structure, where people shot up in the stairwells, a loading dock by the river that stank like rot, or a cemetery on Santa Monica Boulevard beside the Paramount lot. I told my sister it would be quiet work. Watch some cameras, walk a loop, make sure the gates are locked, call LAPD if someone tried to camp inside. Nobody fights you for a tomb, I said. Nobody gets violent over roses and names carved in stone. I believed that for about 4 nights. My name is Daniel. I'm 32, and at the time I'd just been laid off from a hotel front desk job that I knew too well. I started nights at Hollywood Forever in March, right after the rain but before the heat. If you live in LA, you know the way the air smells then. Wet asphalt and jasmine and brake dust. The cemetery office closes at 5. Visitors drift out by 6. After that, it's us. 2 night guards, a roving supervisor who sometimes stops by, and the cats. The cats are fat and famous there. People leave plates of Friskies under the yews. They walk the graves like they own them and stare at you like you're the intruder. My partner those first weeks was a guy named Luis who had 12 years on me and a knee that crackled like popcorn. He knew everything about that place. Which mausoleum had the coldest air? Which crypts families kept stocked with fresh flowers? Which corners drew teenagers who wanted to scare their dates? From the back lawns you can hear the Paramount lot. It's a constant hush like a freeway. But if the wind shifts, lines of dialogue float over the wall, or a fake gunshot pops, or someone laughs too big for 2 in the morning. The wall is tall and beige and blank. In the moonlight, it looks like a screen. I never stopped noticing it. There are schedules for the patrols. The big one is the Cathedral Mausoleum, the old building that holds the brass front crypts, tight aisles, and marble so polished it throws your face back at you. We check the doors at midnight and again at 3. You go in, take a slow lap with your flashlight, glance up at the security bubbles in the corners, and you leave the same way you came. No grand gestures. The trick, Louis said, was to respect the quiet. Don't come in there like you're trying to wake people up, he told me the first night. Low light, slow steps, mind your radio volume. You do that, you'll be fine. On my fourth shift, we were coming off a movie night. People bring blankets and wine and watch old films on the lawn in front of another mausoleum. They had shown a comedy and left the smell of popcorn and sunscreen behind, along with 1,000 footprints pressed in the grass. We did the post-event walkthroughs, trash cans, restrooms, the gate on Gower. I could feel the night pulling down quiet the way a stagehand hauls a curtain. The sprinklers chittered. A siren drifted and got swallowed by the palms. Luis sent me to the cathedral while he finished his loop by the pond. The cathedral is colder than the air outside, no matter the season. You open the door and a pane of cool sits on your face like someone's hand. The foyer is simple, a tile floor and a table where families leave guest books on certain holidays. Straight ahead are the aisles, names in gold, years, 2 vases at each slot for flowers, little laminated photos tucked into corners. I've never been religious, but I learned how to say hello in a room like that. You say it in your head and you mean it. Hello, good evening, just passing through. I clicked my light low and started down the center aisle, heel to toe to keep my footsteps soft. A radio check-in came through from Luis, just the code we use when we move zones. I answered softly and kept going. A week in, a place begins to map in your body. You know the distance from your last breath to your next one. The cathedral took me 4. By the second breath, I was even. By the third, I was already turning toward the door. That's when I saw the shadow. It wasn't a ghostly shape or a trick of the light. It was a person's outline, taller than me, lean, moving with purpose in the aisle 2 over. No sound. I caught it in the periphery and snapped my light that direction. The beam caught the marble and it did something I'd never seen stone do. It rippled. The way heat bends the air above a grill, the way water blurs a reflection when you drag your hand through it. The shadow folded into that ripple and vanished. I stood still for a good 5 seconds and then did the only thing you can do, which is pretend you're not scared. You sweep the other aisles with your light. You call out your name and your company so any living person knows you're human. You announce you're armed even if you're not. I'm not. I walked the entire building. Every door locked. No windows open. I checked the mechanical room with the jangly pipes and the old fuse panel. I checked the niche room where they store urns. Nothing. On the way out, I stopped and held the light on the marble where I'd seen the ripple and the air ran like a stream again. Small waves. Then still. Back outside, I told myself it was one of those optical things you get when you point a strong flashlight at a glossy surface. Your eyes chase the light and you see motion that isn't there. I didn't tell Luis, not that night. I told myself I'd go back the next loop and it would be normal. It wasn't. The general outline of someone moving hung around the edges of that building for the rest of the week, like it knew my schedule. Sometimes I'd catch it in the chrome of a vase, once in the reflection of my light on a brass nameplate. Never dead in front of me, never with detail, never a face. Only the sense that something was pacing and the sense that if I aimed right at it, the wall would breathe. On the 7th night, I told Luis what I'd been seeing because my skin didn't want to be the only one who knew anymore. He nodded and pointed with his chin, the way older guards do when they don't want to say something out loud. The swimmer, he said. I was waiting to see if you got it. The what? The swimmer. Some of the guys call it that. You shine your light and you get that water thing. I don't know. It's been happening since before me. Some years you get more, some less. He rubbed his knee. Don't chase it. You're messing with me. He looked at me long enough that I knew he wasn't. Then he told me the story everyone adds to a place like that. Decades ago, before they put in a new roof, there was a leak. Rain seeped down behind the marble and left stains that looked like hands. A maintenance supervisor slipped on a wet patch and broke his hip. A few years after that, a guard stepped back and his light hit the wall and he swore he saw himself on the other side of the stone, as if he were in a pool. He quit that night, Luis said. Didn't come back to collect his last check. I wasn't here yet, but I heard it enough times to stop making jokes about it. That should have been it. A story shared between 2 tired men at 2 in the morning to explain why a job that's mostly empty can still make your chest tight. But it wasn't just us. A week later, a man in his 50s came in at 9:30 with a vase packed tight with white lilies, the kind that knock you over with scent. He wore a suit, no tie, and held himself like the fabric hurt. He asked if he could bring the flowers into the cathedral because he worked early and couldn't come during daylight. We're not supposed to let visitors in after hours, but grief is a rule breaker and the office had left a note for us with his name. He stood with us at the door and said his son had been cremated and was in the niche that faced west. He didn't want the lilies to wilt in his car. We walked him down the aisle and he stopped 2 rows in, hand flattening against his chest like he needed to hold his heart in. I stepped back to give him room and saw his profile reflected in the marble across from him. The reflection didn't match. In it, his shoulders slumped in a way his real shoulders didn't. In it, his head was turned before he turned. He must have seen something too, because he said, not to us but to the room, "Don't play tricks," in a soft voice you use for a child. The lilies shifted in the vase. I would have sworn a breeze moved through, except that I've never felt breeze in that building. He asked if there was a window open. Luis told him no. He nodded, slid a little laminated soccer photo into the frame around the urn, touched the glass and left. At the door, he asked me if I ever felt like he did, like the air inside the cathedral was thicker than the air outside and tasted faintly like a penny. I told him yes. We stood on the steps and listened to the city for a minute. He thanked us, put on his mask, and walked away looking smaller. I watched his reflection in the glass door jitter as if a drop of water had hit it. That became my thing, noticing water where there shouldn't be water. A clean ring on the tile around a dry vase, dark patches on the grout that faded the moment I blinked, once a bead of moisture on a brass name that swelled enough to slide and leave a clear trail. I wiped it with a paper towel and it came away smelling faintly like old flowers and the chlorinated air you get at an indoor pool. I brought it up with our supervisor, Graciela, who's even-keeled and immune to drama as a rule. "Condensation," she said. "You ever leave a cold drink on a table?" I wanted to tell her that I don't drink cold soda in a marble tomb, but I kept it to myself and signed her clipboard. Then the camera started acting up. The system there is old. The footage has that slight fisheye bend and the timecode lags, but it works. We have a monitor in the tiny security office off the main gate. You can watch the lawn, the gate on Gower, the office lobby, and the foyers of the mausoleums. You can't see down the aisles. I found that comforting until I didn't. On a Sunday at 2:16 a.m., the cathedral foyer camera showed a dark, humanish shape past the glass doors and stopped dead center in the field of view. It didn't look toward the camera. It paced back and forth the way someone does when they're on the phone. It moved with that same contained purpose I'd seen out of the corner of my eye, the kind of motion you feel in your gut before you name it. I called Luis without taking my eyes off the monitor. He hustled in, stood behind me, and watched the thing pace 3 more lengths. "Turn the foyer lights up," he said, and I did. As soon as the fluorescence flicked and the glass brightened, the shape stepped up to the door and the black square where the door edge meets the wall shimmered, like heat over a hood. The shape pressed into it and thinned and was gone. I know how this sounds. I know every simple explanation. I tried them all on myself. Someone outside the building with a flashlight, a moth on the camera dome, a lag in the video feed, a reflection off the glass from our own monitor. The next morning I went to the foyer at 10 to look at the door. There was no black square. The seam between the door and the frame is gray metal and a strip of rubber. The glass is safety glass with a wire grid. Nothing special, except that at 2:16 a.m. the night before, the edge of the world had turned to water and something walked into it. When you start to personalize fear, it starts to personalize you back. That's my theory. I began to watch for the swimmer on purpose, and the swimmer obliged. There were rules to it which made it worse. It did not like the open air. It liked surfaces. Marble, glass, polished bronze, the glossy black plaques where dates are etched. It did not show up in the security bubbles or on the dull gray of the tile. It preferred to be adjacent to light rather than in it. If I shone low and to the side, I could catch its edge. If I shone straight at it, the wall flexed and the shape thinned like a stain. Luis told me not to chase it, and I tried. I really did. But I had the stupid brave streak you get when you're tired enough nights in a row. One loop, I walked the cathedral with my light turned completely off. I let the emergency exit signs outline the aisles. I let the faint spill from the foyer bleed in. The air tasted cold. The smell of lilies and chrysanthemum and damp stone laid a film on my tongue. Halfway down the 3rd aisle, something brushed my sleeve without sound. Not catching, not tugging, just a reminder. I am next to you. I froze. Every hair on my arms lifted under my jacket. I took 2 slow breaths and lifted my hand with the flashlight but didn't turn it on. In the glass of a niche door next to my knuckles, something darker than dark leaned close. I didn't see my face. I saw a suggestion of cheek and shoulder as if I were looking through smoked glass into an unlit room. My finger trembled on the switch and I made a decision I still think about now. I raised the light and held it away and turned it on at the floor instead of the wall. The light splashed over my shoes. The shadow withdrew fast like a fish startled by a hand. "What if you had turned it on at your face?" Luis asked me later when I told him. He was picking sesame seeds off a stale bagel he found in the office fridge. I said I didn't know. Then he told me the part he hadn't yet. 2 summers earlier, a kid on camera had stuck around after a movie night and hid inside until close. The night guard that summer was a big guy named Terry who jogged marathons. He found the kid in the cathedral around 2, thumb typing on his phone like he owned the place. Terry told him to get out. The kid, being 20 and invincible, asked for a selfie with a joke about just one with the dead. Terry later said the kid lifted his phone and the camera saw something behind him that wasn't there. The phone flashed and the kid backed into the wall like he'd been pushed. He didn't go into the marble. He didn't disappear. He fell and cracked his head on the tile and his phone skittered face down. When they picked it up, the screen showed his own face bent and blurred like it had been shot underwater. Terry left for a different post after that. He wouldn't write it up. He only told it as a warning. Don't play with the camera in there. Don't point bright light at names after midnight. Let the dark be the dark. All of this would make a decent campfire story if it had ended there, with a few jumpy nights and a creepy legend that makes you keep your eyes forward. But Hollywood Forever is a place where thousands of people have put their love and their grief in the ground and sealed it up with marble, and sometimes I think that much feeling changes the physics. The night it turned, the city had one of those rare summer storms. Heat built for days and then the sky opened after midnight. The palm fronds slapped like sails. The Paramount wall turned black. Sirens echoed and then burrowed into the rain noise and disappeared. We were down a guard because someone called out sick, so it was just me and Luis from 10 to 6. The rain made everything louder and quieter at once. The office roof pinged. The lawns shone like film. We did a fast drive around in the cart at 1, just to make sure the gates held and then split for the inside checks. Luis took the columbarium. I took the cathedral. I told myself I would go quick. In and out. Lights low. Say hello, keep moving. The moment I opened the cathedral door, the cold hit like a walk-in freezer. My breath puffed. I figured the rain had dropped the temperature and the stone held it. The foyer light flickered. The emergency exit signs glowed dull. I radioed in, and my transmission came back with a crackle and a wet guttural sound that wasn't a word. I tried again, the same. I told myself water got into something and it was fine. I put my radio on my belt and kept it there. Halfway down the first aisle, the hairs on the back of my neck rose. I didn't stop. I let my light paint the floor, warm circle moving with my steps. In the glass of a niche to my right, a deeper dark matched me. It didn't mimic, it paced. I turned the light a fraction higher to keep from tripping. The marble quivered the way it had before and then steadied. The air pressed on my eardrums. Somewhere a drop of water hit tile and made a sound like a finger tap. I rounded the corner for the second aisle and saw movement at the far end. Not the swimmer. Luis. His silhouette is easy to know. Wide shoulders, the cant of his head. He lifted a hand. I tapped my radio and got nothing but hiss. I waved and kept going. I figured the storm had pushed his schedule and he was cutting through to save time. I turned into the third aisle to meet him. He wasn't there. He should have been at the cross aisle. The floor was dry. The light was flat. In the niche glass to my left, a man stood at the far end of the aisle and lifted his hand. I saw him in the reflection. When I turned my head, the aisle was empty. In the glass, he took a step toward me. I don't know why I did it. Habit or stubbornness or because I wanted something solid to fight. I lifted my light and I shone it at his chest in the reflection. The wall between us rippled like the surface of a pool struck by a thrown stone. The light doubled on the glass, flared, and made the aisle white. The man in the reflection stepped into the flare as if he were stepping into sunlight. The ripples raced outward and then drew in, like the moment a drain takes a sink. The light in my hand dimmed with a soft electric sigh and died, and I was in the dark with the taste of cold metal on my tongue. I took 1 breath. 2. I bent to bang the flashlight on my thigh and something tapped the outside of the niche glass. 3 times with the precise pressure of fingernails. I stood up slowly and found myself looking into the smoked depth again. Not my face. Not anyone's face. The sense of a person on the other side, close enough to fog the glass with a breath. Then faintly, words in the radio hiss I'd left on my belt. My name, but elongated and wrong, as if spoken while someone's mouth was full of water. I backed away. I didn't run. People always say they'd run. It's hard to run in the dark on tile. I went to the cross aisle and turned left toward the foyer. A shadow matched me in the brass. I moved faster. At the last corner, something washed through the building. There's no other word. The cold thickened and moved like a body of water sloshing. The hair on my arms lay flat. I heard a choked voice say, "Danny," in a way I have only ever heard one person say it, my sister, when she's trying not to cry. I turned because that's what you do when you hear your sister, even when you know she's in an apartment in Echo Park asleep. There are rows of small square glass doors along the wall at that corner, each with a name and a date and a little latch. In the center of one door, letters formed, not by fog but by the absence of fog. Clear writing drawn by a fingertip from the other side. Leave. Then the E smeared as if the writer's finger had lost strength. I stepped forward without thinking and pressed my palm to the glass. It was very cold. A palm met mine on the other side. The shape matched my hand in size and alignment, like I was high-fiving myself, but the texture was wrong. It wasn't the fleshy spring of a living hand. It was soft like the underside of a jellyfish and slick and strong. I yanked my hand back with a sound I didn't know was in me. Behind me, a thud and a drag as if someone had fallen and a knee caught. I turned with my dead flashlight raised like a club. A figure stood 2 aisles back, tall and narrow, each border a little blurred like outlines seen through rain. It moved the way people do in water, arms tight to the body, small economical steps. I didn't breathe. It looked straight at me and took a step and another, and then the foyer light flickered alive and it thinned the way a shadow thins when you lift a lamp. It pressed itself into the narrow black seam where the glass door meets the frame. The seam wrinkled and drew in, and the figure went with it. My radio squelched loud and Graciela's voice came through clean and sharp. "Power bump. You too good?" I said too loud yes, and I walked out of the cathedral without looking at another single reflection. In the rain, the gravel crunched like bones. Luis called in that he was at the office. I got there and he was pale and wet, and he laughed when he saw me because he said I was paler and wetter. We didn't talk for a long minute. Then he said, "You saw it." Not a question, I nodded. He said, "And I heard my mother." He hasn't heard his mother in years. That shook me harder than anything else. We made one more round together before dawn with the light bars on the cart and the storm slacking to a steady patter. We did not go back into the cathedral. We told ourselves we were being efficient. At 6, the day crew came in damp and cheerful and the office smelled like coffee. Graciela had us fill out an incident report about the power bump and the radio trouble. When she asked if anything else unusual happened, we looked at each other, and I said there was some moisture in the cathedral, maybe a minor leak. She said she'd put in a work order. I went home, showered, and slept with the bathroom light on. I put a towel over the mirror because that's a thing I've always done when I felt watched, and that morning I felt watched enough to take the extra 20 seconds. When I woke, the towel was on the floor. I told myself I'd knocked it down. I told myself a lot of things. The next night, I told Luis I was done with the cathedral for a while. He said fine. He didn't argue. We traded loops and I did the long walk by the pond and the wall and the office where they hang photos of the old days. I did not look across the road at the glass front of the office door when I came back from my loops. I did not check my hair in the monitor, even when it reflected me back. At 3, we had coffee in the office and talked about the Dodgers and how the rain knocked the dust off the mountains so you could see them like a green screen backdrop. At 3:15, the foyer camera for the cathedral blinked and went to black and then came back, and I saw something that made my tongue go dry. The camera doesn't see down the aisles. It only sees the little lobby, 2 chairs families rarely use, a stand for guest books, the doors. In the second chair, a man sat as if he'd been there all night. He wore a uniform like mine. Security patch, dark jacket. He had the posture of someone who hadn't slept well in a week. He leaned forward and stood, and I felt my stomach drop because somewhere deep in my head, my body recognized the way my own knee doesn't fully straighten from an old skateboard misstep. The man turned his head and the foyer glass flashed with a ripple like a fishtail. He reached for the door. His hand met the seam where the glass sits in the frame. He hesitated. Then he turned, as if he'd heard something down an aisle, and stepped away and went out of the camera's view. The time code said 2:16 a.m. It was 3:17 when we saw it. The timestamp was an hour old. We rewound the DVR 10 minutes. Then 20. The shot stayed the same. Empty foyer. Empty chairs. Doors dark, a film of rain running down the outside. We played it forward again and watched the man sit, stand, reach, hesitate, and leave. I said out loud to the empty office, "That's me," which is not a clever thing to say and not useful. Luis didn't disagree. He did what he always does when the world tilts. He went practical. He said, "Go walk by the cathedral. Don't go in. If you see anything, call me." I went and stood under the eave where the rain made a curtain. The foyer light glowed and the chairs sat and the glass looked like glass. I saw my reflection in it, soft because of the water, and I raised my hand. The reflection raised his hand. 1 second, 2. I lowered mine. The reflection lowered his. Everything on time. Then the reflection looked over my shoulder before I did, just a fraction early, like a person responding to a noise. I turned. There was nothing behind me but the Paramount wall and a street light humming an electric hum, and a cat sliding under a hedge. When I looked back, the reflection's face had a ripple through it like a breath on the surface of a pond. The ripple went from crown to chin and then was gone. I went back to the office and signed my name on the duty log with a hand that wasn't steady. I lasted 3 more nights. Then I told Graciela, gently and with the respect I owe someone who writes schedules in marker, that I needed a different site. She didn't ask why. You can burn out in a lot of ways on nights. She had a strip mall in Burbank with a lot of entry alarms and a coffee shop that opens early. I took it. My last night at Hollywood Forever, I walked the long loop by the pond at 4. The water was black and flat and one lone goose slept with its head tucked. The Paramount wall was a blank held-up moon. When I got to the cathedral, I didn't go in. I stood and breathed and said the goodbye in my head that I had learned to say. I didn't lift my light. On my way out at 6, I passed the office where the day crew gathers, all bright voices and paper cups. The lobby door is glass. It throws the driveway back at you like a movie. I was almost past when my phone buzzed in my pocket. It was a text from an unknown number. It was a photo, grainy with that weird digital gray that makes objects look like they're underwater. It showed a hallway I knew too well. Marble niches, a slant of light on tile. There were wet footprints leading toward the camera and none leading away. The caption under the photo, if you could call it that, was a single word: go. I looked up from the screen to the door glass. The reflection of the driveway rippled and stilled. For a second, the man in the reflection stood a fraction to the left of where I stood and then slid back into place. My stomach turned. I swallowed and walked out into a morning that smelled like wet jacaranda and bus. Breaks and coffee steam. I still live in Echo Park. I still pass the cemetery sometimes because there's no other route that makes sense. I still stop at a light and look at the Paramount wall and think how much it looks like a screen. I taped a towel over my bathroom mirror and then replaced it with a cheap plastic sheet cut from a storage bin lid because I couldn't stand the towel. Plastic warps everything. It makes my face a little like someone else's, which is somehow better. I take my phone into another room at night to charge. I put a strip of masking tape over the front camera. I keep the flashlight app brightness turned down because sometimes I swear when I raise it too high at a shiny surface, the light deepens instead of brightens. Like I'm shining it into black water and the water is absorbing it and growing stronger. Last week, my sister asked me if I wanted to go to one of the movie nights they do there. Friends of hers go. It's a vibe, she said. It's not scary. It's beautiful. People bring picnic baskets. They project the film onto a mausoleum wall and the whole lawn becomes a theater. I told her no thanks, not because I wanted to be dramatic, but because there are places where light and names and night have made a deal I don't understand. You don't have to watch a horror film to feel one lift its head. If you work nights in a place with polished stone, do me a favor. Be careful where you shine your light after midnight. Keep it low. Sweep the floor, not the wall. If you catch a shape out of the corner of your eye, don't try to center it. Let it be almost there. Don't use your front-facing camera as a mirror. If you see words form on glass, listen to them. If you hear your mother or your sister say your name in a room where no one living is standing, answer them the way you would answer a child who's sleep-talking, softly and without moving closer. On my phone, the unknown number that sent the hallway photo never replied to my "Who is this?" I didn't text again. I didn't delete it either. When I look at the picture, the wet footprints on the tile glisten. They look like someone walked out of a pool and stood just long enough to decide. Every time I look, I count how many prints there are and tell myself that number means something. The last time I thought I saw a handprint at the edge of the frame, 5 finger shapes blurred like they were smeared from the other side of glass. I flipped the phone over so the screen faced down on my table and left it that way for the rest of the day. When I went to shower that night, I reached for the light and paused. I listened. I could hear the pipes, the faint echo of traffic, a neighbor's laugh. Then at the edge of the mirror, beneath the plastic sheet, there was that tiny sound of tapping. 1, 2, 3, and a little flex in the warped reflection like something underwater testing the surface. I turned off the light and stood in the door until my eyes adjusted and the mirror was only the outline of a darker rectangle in a dark room. Then I closed the door and went to sleep on the couch with the cats in my building, yowling down the hall at nothing and the city breathing around me. If I dreamt of marble and water and letters written backward, I don't remember. In the morning, the plastic over the mirror had a shallow inward curve at the center. The way a pond dips when a single drop falls and makes its mark. I pressed my finger to it and it sprang back smooth. I don't know if it was always like that. I don't want to check old photos to find out. You can tell yourself a lot of things for a while. Then you make a rule and you live by it. Mine is simple. If I see a surface that throws me back at myself after midnight, I act like it's deeper than it looks. I don't speak into it. I don't reach for it. I don't shine a stronger light. And when I walk by the Paramount Wall at dawn and the breeze runs across it and makes the shadow of the palms waver like seaweed, I don't watch long enough to learn what might be swimming there. I'm not trying to sell a ghost tour or get clout with a spooky story. I'm writing this because I want it out of my head. If this makes you roll your eyes, fine. I'd have rolled my eyes too a year ago. Names are changed, the dates are close, but the places are real. This happened last October in Sleepy Hollow, New York, at the cemetery where Washington Irving is buried. My girlfriend, Maya, is the reason we went. She's a photographer, not influencer levels or anything. She shoots weddings and families on weekends, and for fun, she likes old cemeteries and quiet streets with gas lamps and big maples going red. We had done Greenwood and St. Paul's in the city. Sleepy Hollow kept coming up in her feed. Pumpkins, lantern tours, headstones with lichens like faded script. "It's cute," she said. "We'll get cider. You can carry my tripod and make fun of tourists." We went on a Sunday just before Halloween. The weather had that dry leaf crunch chill and a sky like a clean sheet. We parked near the visitor center and bought a paper map from a small gift shop where the clerk had a Washington Irving pin on his sweater. He circled Irving's plot and said, "Gates close at 5. Please don't be here at 5:01, I mean it. Security is not in the mood." He smiled when he said it, but there was something in his eyes, like he'd said the line 100 times and meant it every time. The place was bigger than we expected. Long rolling hills, oaks and maples, slate headstones tilted like tired teeth. There were a few tour groups, a handful of people with hot drinks, a couple wearing matching flannels arguing quietly about settings on a DSLR. We passed the old Dutch church and the little burying ground up the hill from it, and Maya stopped every 5 steps to take a picture of a fence shadow or a crow on a monument. I'm the one lugging batteries and snacks, but I don't mind. Cemeteries in the afternoon are peaceful in a way regular parks aren't. People bring their inside voices. We found Irving's grave by following the little cluster of folks waiting their turn. It's simple, with coins and a few pens left on the stone and pumpkins with handwritten notes tucked under the bush. Someone had left a tiny copy of The Legend of Sleepy Hollow with a ribbon around it. A college-age guy, baseball cap backwards, was telling his friend about some story of a woman who babysat near here and saw something under the bridge. He had the general, performative campfire tone of somebody who'd been on the internet a lot. Maya set up her tripod and asked a couple in peacoats if they wanted a picture. She's like that, friendly, good at getting strangers to smile. She took theirs, then handed me the remote shutter and stood by the stone with her scarf tucked into her jacket, fingers peeking bare because she refuses to buy proper gloves. "One with the grave in focus, then one with us," she said, and a few with a slow shutter to catch the wind. The first 2 shots were normal. In the third, the one where I stepped back to get more of the stone and the tree behind it, the screen showed a man standing behind us. He was in the gap between our shoulders, set back maybe 6 feet. Dark coat like wool, and at first I thought he was wearing a dark hood pulled forward. Then my brain caught up to the negative space where a head should be. I'm not saying I saw blood or anything. This wasn't a movie. It was like the shape of a body from collar down. High collar, shoulders, the line of arms. But above the collar was just empty space and a sort of haze where light didn't behave right. Everything around him was in focus, but that gap had a softness to it, like heat over asphalt. You could see the tree behind him cleanly, but your eye slid off that place above the collar. I swear I didn't feel the "someone's behind you" tingles until after I saw the preview. But I turned fast. Nothing. Just the tree, its bark gray and pebbled, and the slope down to a line of graves. 2 women with paper cups were drifting toward the tour group. A kid in a beanie hopped across a low stone wall and his mom hissed his name. "Did you get it?" Maya said, still facing the grave. "My hair okay?" "Hold on," I said, and my voice came out tight. I showed her the back of the camera. She frowned. "Is that somebody in a cape?" We both turned again. The same nothing. The same crisp air. The same leaves ticking against each other. I made a joke because that's what I do when I'm uncomfortable. I said, "Congrats, you caught the headless horseman on his day off." Maya did not laugh. She does not like cheap jokes when she's trying to line up a shot. She zoomed in on the screen, pinching with her thumbs. "It's not a reflection," she said. "That's not a smear. This is a person shape. I mean, somebody could have walked through that second," I said. "A bad costume. Maybe he ducked." "Into what?" She pointed. It was open ground behind us for a good 30 feet, then the line of trees. "Want to redo it?" I asked. She hesitated, then shook herself and posed again, forcing a smile. I took 3 more. All clear, we packed up, and that should have been it. We could have left, argued in the car about whether it was a glitch, got inside her, posted a photo with a cute caption and moved on. But when we stepped away from Irving's plot and walked around the bush, we saw the grass. It was flattened in a perfect line starting right behind where we had been standing. Not trampled everywhere. Not random. A beam-shaped path, 1.5 feet wide, pressed down like something heavy had been dragged or had moved exactly there, then continued across the lawn and into the trees. The line didn't curve. It didn't zigzag. It cut straight like somebody had laid a plank and pressed. Maya knelt and touched the grass. The blades were bent and cold, beaded with the kind of damp you get at dawn even though it was 3:30. I looked back toward the grave, then toward the trees. The flattened track ran clean until it reached the leaves under the canopy, and then you couldn't see it clearly anymore because the whole forest floor was leaves. But still, even there you could make out a slight, unnatural flow where the leaves seemed brushed all one way. "People walk here all the time," I said. "Maybe someone pushed a cart." "What cart?" she said softly. "On Sunday across headstones." We heard a small bell then from the old Dutch church. 4 chimes. It was the kind of sound that makes you aware of time all at once. A groundskeeper in a green jacket walked by with one of those trash grabber tools and a white bucket. He saw us staring at the line and paused. "Sir? Ma'am? Everything okay? Do you have special events today?" Maya asked too quickly. "Like performers. A guy in a cape, maybe." The groundskeeper looked behind us. He had the tired, all-weather face of someone who'd worked outside for years. "No," he said, dragging the word. "We don't do actors in the cemetery. We do lantern tours by the church at night. In the cemetery, we ask people to be respectful." "Right," I said, feeling stupid. "Sorry, we thought we saw someone." "Listen," he said kindly. "It's busy. Folks in costume pass on the road, you get reflections, shadows. Happens every year. Sun's low, messes with you. Stay on the marked paths, please. And when that bell hits 5, head to the gate." He moved on and we stood there looking at the straight, cold, pressed-down grass like 2 people considering a dare that only exists if you acknowledge it. I'm not brave. Maya is braver than me, but she's not reckless. She said, "We'll look at the raws later. If it's something weird, it'll be there. Let's do the bridge in the pond." We skirted the trees and heard something that sounded like a horse exhaling. Not a whinny, more like that heavy, hollow blow-through when air leaves a big animal. We both stopped. It came again farther off. There are stables around there, I told myself. Parades, whatever. Maya looked at me, and I could tell she heard the same thing I did and was walking away from it for the same reason I was. We caught the last slice of sun by the water and took a few more photos of stone angels with mossy wings. The sky went pink and then a quick steel gray that meant the chill would chew straight through a jacket. People thinned out fast. By 10 to 5, it was just stragglers and the security guy rattling keys by the gate. We passed the young couple in peacoats again. The girl glanced at us weirdly like she wanted to say something, then looked down. At the car, Maya sat quiet for a minute with the camera in her lap. "I don't want to look at the pictures here," she said finally. "On the laptop. Big screen." We drove down Broadway into Tarrytown, got cider and 2 donuts because it felt normal, and headed back to the city before full dark. The Tappan Zee looked like a runway of lights, and the wind tried to push the car sideways. We didn't talk much. We don't usually have awkward silences. That night we did. At home, we dumped the card and opened Lightroom. The file with the weird figure was there. Not a glitch, not a JPG artifact. In the RAW, the shape had the same not-right texture, like air held in place, above the collar of what really did look like an old-fashioned coat. There was nothing you could call a head. Not black, not cut out. Empty. But the light hitting the tree behind him bent slightly, like something invisible sat between the bark and the camera. We zoomed and zoomed. My eyes watered. We pulled back and tried to laugh at ourselves. It wasn't funny. "I want to check metadata," Maya said. She's that kind of person. She opened the XF and scrolled. Then she stopped and leaned in. "This can't be right." "What?" "Timestamp," she said. "The first 2 are 3:27:14 and 3:27:19. The weird one is 3:26:58. So the camera wrote it a little out of order." "I shot continuous," she said. "Same setting. If anything, there'd be duplicates, not a jump backward." "Maybe your camera clock is haunted," I said, and immediately wished I hadn't. She didn't say anything. The room settled around us in that way apartments do when the heat kicks and then stops. Outside, a siren went past. Normal life, persistent as mold. We went to bed with the laptop still open on the kitchen table. Around 2, I woke to Maya sitting up. Her hair was in her face and she was listening. "Do you hear that?" I held my breath. There was a sound like grass flattening. I know that makes 0 sense. But if you've ever walked through high grass and listened to the hush as it lays down and springs up, that's the rhythm. Except our bedroom is on the 3rd floor of a building in Washington Heights and there is no grass outside our window. The sound passed the way a breeze passes, peeling down the block. After a minute it stopped and I heard people laughing on the sidewalk. A car door slam, a radiator clank. Maya lay back down and put her cold hand on my arm. "I don't want to go back," she whispered, the next morning. "Because fear does stupid arithmetic, if I can explain it. I can control it." We went back. We told our friend Ethan we were going for donuts again and he asked to come. He's one of those gadget guys with a drone in his trunk and a GoPro mounted to his dash. He was thrilled at the idea of spooky Irving content and rolled his eyes when we told him the basic shape of what we'd seen. "It's some dude in a cape," he said, "or someone messing with you. I'll fly the drone over the trees. We'll find him," he said, like a challenge, like a man who has never been wrong in his own mind. We got there just after noon. The place was busier than the day before. Families, a cluster of seniors with matching jackets, a tour leader with a felt hat. We walked the long loop first to pretend we hadn't come for one spot. Leaves drifted in sideways slow motion, and that deep brown smell of damp dirt came up from the low places. When we finally reached Irving's grave, a small tour was finishing. The guide told a neat memorized story about how Irving helped rename the town, and how the Headless Horseman might have come from this real Hessian soldier or that one. The group filed away, taking pictures over their shoulders. We stepped where we had stood the day before. My stomach did a little drop like a minor roller coaster. The grass was unflattened. It was normal grass. Of course it was normal grass. There was no reason it should still be pressed down, but some part of me had expected to see the line like a scar. "I'm getting one more," Maya said. She sat up quickly, almost apologetic to the ghosts around us. "Then we go." She took 2. I stood off to the side. Ethan, God help him, was already launching the drone from an empty patch of path. He guided it toward the trees behind the grave, adjusting his phone against the glare. I watched his screen. The drone dipped into the canopy and you got that green-brown tunnel look. For a second the feed went splotchy, then cleared. "Signal's fine," he said. "No FCC junk up here." On the screen, something moved through the leaves. Not a person. The leaves themselves. A stripe of leaves depressed and lifted and depressed again, as if a heavy beam moved under them. It went in a straight line past a big trunk and then straight again, like a plow cutting one furrow before turning at the end. The stripe moved toward the lawn and then stopped right at the line where the tree's roots made little humps in the grass. It didn't come out, Ethan frowned.
Weird cross breeze. There's no wind, Maya said.
Her voice went small. Do you see wind? We stood very still. The drone's rotors whined at a steady pitch. A crow banged out of a tree and scolded us from the chapel roof. On the drone screen, the leaves held their breath. The bell struck 1. The sound slid through the place like water in a pipe. The drone feed wobbled. Pixelated messy gray went black and then came back with the camera pointing up at the canopy, as if something had reached up and tilted it. Okay, Ethan said. He made a laugh that wasn't a laugh. That's interference. He brought the drone up and out too fast. It skimmed a branch and a yellow leaf stuck to the camera housing. He cursed softly and set it down to pick the leaf off like removing a bug. We decided right then to go. As in, we all agreed in the silent way you agree when your body has made the decision before your mouth. We weren't running exactly. We were walking with purpose. We had to pass the little lane of trees to get back to the main path. As we did, that stripe of pressed leaves flickered into existence again off to our left. I wish there were a better word. It didn't appear like a special effect. It was like noticing your own heartbeat. Once you hear it, you can't unhear it. The stripe ran parallel to us and then angled toward the path. It didn't crunch or thrash. It just displaced. Leaves moved and lay down. The air smelled suddenly like wet hay. Hey, a voice said behind us. Hey folks, it was the security guy from yesterday, same green jacket, same key ring. He jogged up a few steps and stopped, out of breath. Gate closes early today. There's a private service up the hill. If you could head out? We're going, I said too fast. Appreciate it. He smiled at Maya in a way that was meant to be reassuring and made me feel worse. You'd be surprised how many people pretend not to hear. We took the long downhill by the little pond. The surface was smooth and dark like a piece of slate. People's voices were thin and far away. The drone remote beeped and Ethan swore under his breath about battery. It's at 80, he said. Why is it beeping? We cut across the grass to save time, and the hair on my arms notified me, even before I looked down, that we were stepping onto a line of flattened grass that wasn't there a second earlier. It ran right in front of us like a line drawn with a ruler. It led toward the trees we had just left. It also extended the other way, toward the lane, down to the gate. My chest did that hollow drop thing again. Maya grabbed my sleeve. Don't step on it, she said, and I can't explain why that made sense, but it did. We moved sideways to avoid the pressed strip. As we did, the strip shifted. Not fast, not like a snake snapping. It slid a few inches like it was correcting its aim. I'm done, Ethan said, flat and cold. Nope, he started to jog. We jogged too. The line followed. It didn't weave through the grass like a line in water, it just existed. A moving absence that pressed green to dark. It stayed a little to our right as if matching our speed. The way a shadow keeps pace. We reached the road by the gate and people were there again. A family with a stroller. A pair of older women consulting a map. A guy in a Mets cap. The security guard was standing with his hand on the gate chain, talking to a man in a black coat. Relief hit me so hard my knees softened. The pressed line stopped 5 feet behind us and held its place like an obedient dog waiting. The security guard looked at us, looked behind us, and his face shifted in a way I think about when I can't sleep. He didn't look frightened exactly. He looked resigned. He unclipped the chain and pushed one half of the gate open with his hip. You folks have a good day, he said. His voice had lost the cheer. It had turned into something like the tone of a nurse telling you it's time. We went through. As soon as my foot hit the sidewalk, my ears popped. The air got warmer by a degree. My shoulder blades loosened. I didn't know they'd been clenched. We kept walking until we were at the car. Ethan threw the drone into the trunk like it had personally betrayed him. Maya sat in the passenger seat and put both hands on her face. The security guard didn't close the gate right away. He stood where we'd been standing, looking at the grass inside. Then he looked up at the man in the black coat next to him. The man nodded once. I swear to you, both of them stepped back at the same time like choreographed dancers. Then the guard pulled the gate shut. On the drive home, we didn't put on music. Ethan scrolled through his drone footage at red lights and said very little. I'm wiping it, he said once. I don't want this on my phone. That annoyed me in an abstract way, but I didn't argue. Maya leaned her head against the window and watched the blur of brown woods and McDonald's signs and strip malls. Did you smell hay? She asked once. Neither of us answered. At home again, we tried to be normal. We made pasta. We watched half an episode of some comedy show and didn't laugh. We decided not to talk about it until morning. That decision lasted 10 minutes. Maya opened her laptop to email the files to the couple in P-codes because not everything can pause while your brain catches up. She dragged our folder with the Irving shots to the desktop. The computer thought for a second, then made the little duplicate name appear. Irving 1 copy. We both watched the cursor blink. Another duplicate appeared. Irving 1 was copy 2, then another. Irving 1 was copy 3. It wasn't a lot, 3, and then it stopped. It might have been some sync issue with cloud backups. It also might not have been. We opened the first copy. Same photos, same number, in the same order. Except in the shot with the headless figure, he or it was slightly closer to us. I know how that sounds. We did the cheap tests. We overlaid the images like you'd see in a bad supernatural show. They didn't match. In the original, the headless shape stood a few feet behind us. In the copy, the empty above the collar place lined up with my shoulder. In copy 2, the notch was between Maya and me. In copy 3, I could make out the line of a button on the coat sleeve, and the empty place above the collar felt a breath closer. The tree behind us had the same pattern of bark. The coins on the grave were in the same spots. The difference was only the distance of the figure and the way the air around that space bent like heat. Delete them, I said, and when she didn't move, I said it again. Please, just delete them. Maya dragged the copy folder to the trash and emptied it. The computer made that upbeat done sound that felt obscene. I told myself I felt better. We didn't sleep right. I had the kind of half-dreams you get when your body never drops all the way, and every noise has a picture. The radiator hissed like horse breath and my heart stuttered following it. A truck rolled by 5 floors down and the Doppler made a hoofbeat in my ear. I woke twice certain someone was standing in the doorway. There was no outline. There was the sensation of an outline not matching something that should be there. In the morning, we did what we always do when things are too big. We went somewhere boring. We went to the grocery store. We planned meals out loud like normal people. We were in the produce section arguing softly about whether we'd actually eat a bag of spinach before it liquefied when my phone buzzed. It was a text from an unknown number with no contact name, just a New York area code. There was no message, just a photo. I tapped it and it opened to the image of Maya and me at Irving's grave. Not the original, not copy 1 or 2. It was the frame where the empty place had moved between us and you could almost see the edge of a shoulder against Maya's scarf. Below the photo, the timestamp read the previous afternoon. The sender ID was a string of numbers that meant nothing to me. Then right as I started to screenshot it, the text bubble shifted and the number at the top changed to my own phone number. The message thread header said, me. I stared at it until the typing dots appeared. They moved for a long time and then stopped. No new message came. We left the cart in the produce aisle and walked out. I can still see the oranges stacked like cannonballs and the guy misting the lettuce, not looking up. We didn't go back to Sleepy Hollow. I don't know if I should write that like an apology. Part of me thinks if we had gone back and asked enough questions, we could have found a dented fence or a weird reenactor or some art kid with a smoke machine and a story. Instead, we called the cemetery office. Maya did the talking. She said we'd taken some pictures and captured someone who maybe shouldn't have been there, and asked if the groundskeepers had noticed trespassers in costume. The woman who answered said, "We don't allow costumes. If you have a photo of someone trespassing, you can email it. But I'll tell you." And then she stopped, like she'd almost said something and decided not to. "We have security. They're very good. Please send the photo if you'd like. And if you're thinking of sharing it online, know that we ask people to be respectful to the families in the grounds." Maya thanked her and hung up. We didn't send the photo. It felt like we'd be mailing a bomb even if the bomb was only in our heads. 2 days later, a small square of grass on the strip by our building stoop lay pressed in a perfect rectangle, the width of a plank. It ran for 6 feet and then stopped at the sidewalk like the start of a line the chalk didn't finish. I watched people step over it without seeing, bend to tie a shoe, talk into a phone. I stood there long enough that the super asked if I was okay. I lied. I said, "Yes, sorry, just daydreaming." That night, the sounds in the building came in too clearly. You know how in your own apartment the hum of your fridge and the neighbor's TV and the elevator cable make a noise soup you forget? Imagine all that stopping at once, and in that gap you hear a single slow step over grass. Then another. Not on your floor. Not in your room, somewhere moving. I'm not saying a horse. I'm saying wait. Maya started sleeping with the TV on low, something cheerful and old. She put the camera in the closet. She didn't cancel her shoots, but she stopped booking cemeteries and historic houses for a while. Ethan changed the passcode on his phone and made jokes about losing drone footage in mysterious circumstances, like he wanted to be the kind of guy who wasn't shaken. He asked me once, weeks later, if I ever looked in the rear view and felt like the car behind me didn't have a driver. I said no because I wanted to give him the version of reality we both needed. The last thing, and I know this will seem small after everything else, is the pen. I keep a pen in my coat pocket. I've kept the same pen in the same pocket for years because I'm that guy, the one who will hand you a pen at the DMV and feel smug. A week after Sleepy Hollow, I put my hand in my pocket and felt not the pen but something soft and slender. I pulled out a long blade of dead grass, folded on itself as if laid there deliberately to fit the pocket, an old habit of someone who keeps hay in his coat. It smelled like the underside of a bale. I don't walk through fields. I live in the city. I threw it away and told myself 100 small lies. The way you tidy after a party by shoving things into a closet and shutting the door hard. If you're expecting a clean ending, there isn't one. We didn't set up cameras and catch a headless man pacing our hallway. We didn't wake with mud on the floor. We didn't die. We moved apartments, but that had been planned before October, and I'm not giving you an address so you can tell me a ghost followed the U-Haul. We don't talk about Sleepy Hollow except in the tired, gentle way you talk about a fight you almost had but didn't. It's been months. Sometimes I still hear that hush when I'm falling asleep. Everything in the city falling quiet but one thing moving. Pressing. Sometimes I dream of a coat sleeve brushing my shoulder, and I wake with a heat in my throat like I've been running. Sometimes I take out my phone and scroll to the photo I didn't delete. The original shot we took at Irving's grave before the copies appeared. I stare at the empty space above the collar and I wait for my brain to resolve it into a joke, to settle on a trick of light, a reflection. It never does. It just slides off that place where something should be. If you go to Sleepy Hollow in October, take your pictures. Be respectful. Leave a coin on the stone if you want. When the bell rings for closing, go. If you see a straight trail where the grass flattens in a line, don't step on it. If you smell hay and there are no horses, don't follow it. And if you look at the screen in your hands and behind you is the shape of a man without a face to pin a name to, don't be like me. Don't turn around hoping there will be nothing there. There will be nothing. That's the part that sticks. The nothing will look at you. And if it decides you're interesting, it might keep walking after you, slow and patient. A line through the world that you can't see unless you stop and look down at where you've walked and realize the grass is lying flat in a way it wasn't before. I'm not from Illinois. I'm a tradesman from Indiana who only ends up in Chicagoland when work drags me there. That's how I wound up at Bachelor's Grove on a cold Saturday in late October. The kind of gray afternoon when every sound feels like it falls straight down instead of traveling. I wasn't alone. My cousin Alicia came along because she's into abandoned places and old cemeteries. And my friend Mark came because he doesn't like us going into the woods without a rational mind, which is how he describes himself whenever we chase a weird story. We'd gotten the tip from a guy at a used camera shop in Oak Lawn. He said he'd been out walking his dog near Rubio Woods after work, saw lights moving like lanterns along a tree line, and then watched them slide toward a pond like a pair of will-o'-the-wisps. It would have been just another story if he hadn't finished with, "You can say I'm full of it, but I heard the dog whine and sit down like he was in trouble." He doesn't do that. The dog thing stuck with me. Dogs don't usually lie. We parked off Midlothian Turnpike around 4:30, close enough to the trailhead that I could see the gap people have worn in the fence. The path is muddy there, full of roots and beer caps and an old bicycle tire half buried in leaves. There was a couple coming out when we arrived, middle-aged, hands shoved into their coats, eyes not meeting ours. They nodded, that tight nod strangers give when they're somewhere they think they shouldn't be. The woman muttered, "Sun drops quick," as if warning us off without wanting to make it a thing. 20 minutes, Mark said, checking his watch like a hall monitor. Forest Preserve closes at sundown. We get in, we take a few photos, we get out. No arguing. Alicia already had her Nikon out. She's got this habit of photographing the way into a place the same way she photographs the thing itself, as if she's building proof later. that we didn't just imagine a door where there wasn't one. She snapped the gap in the fence, the boot prints in the mud, a crushed cigarette with lipstick on the filter. "Evidence," she said in a playful voice. "Case file. The trail isn't long, but it has a way of getting quiet as you walk it. The highway sound slips away. Your boots start to make the loudest noise you can hear. We passed graffiti that looked more tired than threatening. A length of chain draped over a stump, and then the trees opened up on the cemetery. It's not big. Some stones are broken, some half swallowed by the earth, and someone keeps the weeds down in a way that feels like a truce rather than a victory. There was a pair of teens by the far fence taking selfies. Girl in a black hoodie, boy in a White Sox cap, and they left when they saw us coming. Embarrassed laughter trailing behind them like streamers. I'm not going to pretend I didn't feel anything right away. It wasn't a blast of cold or a whisper in my ear. It was more like the feeling you get when you walk into a room where an argument just ended. The air holds on to something. You end up squinting without knowing why. "This is it?" Mark said. "Legend Central?" His voice had that edge it gets when he's trying to keep us grounded. He did a slow turn, took in the toppled stones, the sag in the fence, the little offerings people leave. Coins on a marker, silk flowers, a plastic rosary turning gray. Alicia was already moving. She doesn't walk straight lines in places like this. She drifts, gets low, frames things with her fingers. She crouched near a stone with a lamb on top of it, the baby marker everyone posts online, and took 3 quick shots. "Light is perfect," she said. "Silver and flat. Everything looks older." I wanted to move right then before the dark made us clumsy, but the pond was only another minute into the trees. People call it a pond, but it looks more like a quarry hole that forgot it used to be useful. The path to it is narrow and soft, and the water sits in a square that doesn't match the world around it. A shopping cart rusted in the shallows. Leaves floated in a tight ring near the center as if they were circling a drain that wasn't there. "Okay," Mark said, lowering his voice without meaning to. We looked, we saw. Time to go. I was going to agree. I really was. Then something blinked across the water. Not the sun, because there wasn't any. Not a headlamp. It was the kind of light you get from old glass. A dull, warm nickel color shaped by a chimney and a flame. It appeared, disappeared, then moved 3 feet to the left and hovered above the far bank, steady and low. Alicia is faster than the part of my brain that says wait. She lifted the Nikon and fired. A shutter sound in a place like that is sharp as a twig snapping. The light dimmed like it had turned toward us. And my chest did that thing it does when a car brake light flashes in front of you and you're not expecting it. "Probably a reflection," Mark said, which would have sounded more convincing if his hands weren't already in his pockets and his shoulders weren't doing that pre-flight hunch. "From what?" Alicia said. "There's no sun, no houses. Nothing to reflect." She took another picture. Another. She stepped to the edge where the mud gives way and planted her boots like someone stepping into a boat. The light rose. Not far, just enough to clear a low branch, and it drifted toward the center, bobbing. It wasn't steady. It moved like it was being carried, a rhythm to it like walking on uneven ground. 2 steps, pause. 2 steps, pause. "Get back," Mark said. "If that's somebody, let them do whatever they're doing. I'm not arguing with a guy and his lantern in the woods." I took a breath to agree, to pull Alicia back by the elbow. But the water answered for us. A set of ripples cut out from the light like a spill on polished stone. They didn't spread in circles. They went in lines, parentheses opening from a point you couldn't see. The ring of leaves drew tighter, then loosed as if something big moved under them. I felt the temperature drop and told myself it was the breeze skimming the water. I heard a wet sound like a boot slipping, and told myself it was the shopping cart tipping. I told myself a lot of things, and they were reasonable. And then the light went out and all I could hear was my own breathing. We didn't leave. I wish I could tell you we did, that I'm responsible that way. But we all learned something that day about how curiosity is a kind of gravity. Alicia whispered, "One more minute," without looking at us, as if speaking too loud would knock the thread loose. Mark swore under his breath. I took a step closer to the bank and leaned over the water to catch any hint of movement. It came back. Not the light this time, but the feeling of being looked at. It's not unique to haunted places. I felt it in parking garages and the wrong bar on the wrong night. My scalp tightened. The hair on my arms lifted. The pond didn't move, but something in me did. like how you feel a bass note you can't hear. Then the water lifted. It wasn't a dramatic rising wave. It was a swell, a square of pond that came up as if a platform had pushed from underneath and didn't displace a drop over the edge. In that square, a shape grew pale as if a light under the surface turned on and revealed it from the inside. A woman. I know how that sounds, but there isn't a better word. She rose from the chest up, hair floating behind her like weeds, a dress the color of old paper clinging to her arms. Her eyes were wrong. They were not like a dead person's eyes in a movie. They were bright with nothing in them. 2 black coins you couldn't see the bottom of. The part of my brain that catalogs things registered the details. A high collar, buttons down the front, the suggestion of a brooch at her throat, but none of that mattered because she didn't look like a photograph. She looked present, a thing in front of us, water running off her shoulders in lines neat as comb teeth. Alicia made a sound I'd never heard come out of her, something between a gasp and a word that didn't arrive. The Nikon clicked twice. Mark took a step back and then another. I opened my mouth and everything in me shrank from saying hello, because it felt exactly like the wrong thing to do. She turned her head as if listening to something either behind us or far away. The weeds behind her trembled like a current only she was in. She moved. Not toward us, not away. She moved in a way that told me movement wasn't the point. Attention was the point. Then with a slow grace that made it worse, she slid back down, as if a hand under her chin let go. The surface closed and took her back in. The swamp smell came up from the water like breath. It might have been there the whole time, but we only smelled it then. Something small hit the bank at Alicia's feet, a little click in the mud. She shined her phone flashlight and found a round thing like a button, pearl or bone with 2 holes rim stained the color of tea. She didn't pick it up. She raised her light and it fell across something on the opposite bank. There was mud there where a path met the water. In that mud were footprints. They were not ours. They were not boots. They were small and neat like shoes you'd wear to church in 1910. They faced the pond. A second pair overlapped them. Larger, a man's maybe, facing away. The neat prints stopped at the water. The larger prints came back up the path and vanished under leaves. "We have to go," Mark said. His voice cracked and he swallowed it down. "We have to go now, we didn't run." It wasn't that kind of fear. It was careful fear. The kind where you keep your steps measured so you don't wake whatever might still be sleeping. The light didn't come back. We cut back through the stones. The cemetery felt different on the way out. Lower somehow, a little hollow like a theater after the show when they pull the house lights up. I kept waiting to hear someone else on the trail. Another group of idiots like us, voices and laughter, a normal noise to break it. Nothing. Just our boots and the old leaves and the dry sound of bare branches touching each other. At the fence we stopped because a man was there. Standing half in the gap, a forest preserve patch on his jacket. He had the posture of someone who doesn't get to choose how much of the world disappoints him. "Park's closed," he said. He didn't ask us where we'd been. He knew. "You folks get turned around?" "Yes, sir," Mark said. "Our bad. You didn't see any fires inside, did you?" The man said. His voice was tired, not unkind. "People set them sometimes. We try to head that off." "No," I said. "No fires." My mouth started to form the word lantern and then didn't. He stepped aside to let us out, then slid the chain back through the fence. He didn't lock it. You could see he didn't have enough hands for the job the world had given him. He looked at us like he was waiting for something else, an apology, a promise, I don't know. Then he nodded once and walked toward his truck with the sort of slowness that gets people to think twice about testing your patience. At the car, Alicia put her camera on her lap like it was fragile. She didn't talk until we were back on the road. Even then what she said was, "I got it," without looking up. I got her. Mark drove. He doesn't like to relinquish control when he's spooked. He cut over to Cicero and put on the radio, and let it play whatever it wanted to play as long as it was loud enough to make the car feel like a normal place. At a gas station he pulled in, hands tight on the wheel, and said he needed a drink. While he was inside, Alicia showed me the back of her camera. "You expect those photos to be trash?" I did. "You expect a blur you can argue away?" The first shot was the pond with that flat silver light you get from 1,000 clouds. The ring of leaves was crisp. The shopping cart leaned into the water like it was tired of waiting for someone to rescue it. Nothing strange. The second photo showed the same scene but with one thing added. A smudge near the center, not ash, not fog, just a blur that didn't match the rest. The third photo made my stomach knot. The blur had resolved into shape. White, human, the suggestion of a face exactly wrong in the way you know without ever having seen it before. The eyes were the part you couldn't look at for long. She wasn't at the surface in that one. She was beneath it by maybe a foot, clear as glass. The fourth shot was a mess of ripples and digital noise, like the camera had tried to read something it wasn't allowed to understand. "Email them to me," I said. "Before we get home. Back them up, everything." "Already done," she said. She breathed in slow through her nose and out her mouth like a runner. "I'm shaking and my hands aren't shaking." "Does that make sense?" "Yeah," I said, because it did. Mark came back with 3 coffees. His hands needed a job, and we didn't talk about the thing in the water on the way back to the hotel. It's strange how quickly the highway can make you lie to yourself. You get on a road with real lights and other cars and signs that say exit 4B, and your brain starts to fold what happened into a drawer labeled story, to be told later. I tried to put it in that drawer, and the drawer didn't shut. We stayed at a place in Alsip that smelled like old cigarettes and lemon cleaner. Alicia plugged her camera into the wall and started moving files to her laptop. Mark flipped between a hockey game and a show where people remodel kitchens and pretended to care about both. I pulled up my email and waited for the 4 photos to land. They did. 3 were exactly what we'd seen on her screen. The 4th, the one with her clearest, opened to a field of gray and a message I'd never seen before, even in a lifetime of junk files and corrupted downloads. It said the image couldn't be displayed because it contained unsupported color data. The file size was wrong by a few kilobytes compared to the one on Alicia's desktop. The name was the same. The timestamp wasn't. "Try again," I said. "Send it again." She did. It showed up. Same error. We tried airdropping it. Dropbox, we tried naming it picture.jpg like a caveman to trick it. The one on her laptop stayed perfect. Every version that left that machine glitched, like someone was standing between her and the rest of the world with their hand on our modem. At some point, out of stubbornness, I opened the Photos app and zoomed all the way into the first shot, the normal one. I went to the far left bank of the pond and started moving across an inch at a time. There, at the very edge where the reeds make shadow stripes on the water, I saw a shape, not a face, not anything as easy as that. It was a tiny pinprick circle, just a shade darker than the water around it, the size of the head of a nail. It does not make sense to say a circle was looking at me. I know it doesn't. I zoomed out and the circle disappeared and the scene became reasonable again. We didn't sleep much. When I did, I dreamed about being in a room where the windows were nailed shut and I was responsible for letting a breeze in that never came. In the morning, we drove back to Indiana with less commentary than usual. Mark dropped into his thing where he tells you the practical outcome of the last 24 hours, as if it's a verdict. "We trespassed," he said. "We scared ourselves. We saw a trick of light. We took photos of a trick of light. We're going to promise each other not to go back." No one promised. Not out loud. 2 days passed. Normal days. Work, laundry, the sound of the neighbor's leaf blower starting too early. Alicia texting me about how she kept seeing that error code when she tried to move the clear photo to an external drive. Then I came home to find something on my kitchen table I know I didn't put there. It was small. I almost didn't see it because it looked like a drop of water dried into a circle. It was the button from the pond, the same pale tea-brown rim, the same 2 tiny holes. I froze in that stupid way people do when they don't know if a thing is a threat or not, when they're trying to decide how black mold is different from a shadow. I live alone. I don't leave my door open. The table is in the middle of my kitchen, not by the entry. There's a window above the sink that I lock on habit and check again even when I know I locked it. I did something dumb then. I touched it. It wasn't slimy. It wasn't even cold. It was room temperature and faintly rough, like a thing rubbed by fabric for years. In the 2 seconds it sat in my palm, the smell came up. Stale water, roots, the sweet rot of leaves soaked too long. I put it down and the smell went away. I bagged it in a plastic sandwich bag like it was evidence and drove to Mark's. He lives in a ranch with his mother, who is kind and loud and calls me honey even when she's mad about something on TV. I held up the bag and expected him to laugh, to launch into his speech about confirmation bias. He didn't. He said the exact words I needed him not to say. "Thank God," he said without sarcasm. "Good. So it wasn't just me." He led me to his sink and held up his right hand. The skin between his thumb and forefinger was red and puckered like he'd rubbed it with a rough sponge. I woke up with this, he said. No idea what from. It smelled like the pond. I didn't tell you because I figured it was a rash or I grabbed something stupid. Then last night I wake up because I hear water running. The tap's dry. I check the bathroom. Dry. But my carpet by the bed is wet in 2 circles the size of dessert plates. I wipe it up, and when I come back from getting a towel, there's a coin on the floor, old as hell, face worn off. I threw it away. I'm not proud of that, but I threw it away. I pulled the baggie out again because it seems you have to show people the thing you found twice before it's real. He stared at it like he was memorizing it in case it disappeared the second he blinked. Alicia came over an hour later, the Nikon strap around her neck even in our living room. She put her laptop on the coffee table and opened the folder with the 4 photos. A gray box sat where the good one should have been, a file name and a size that didn't make sense. It went bad, she said quietly, on the laptop. I opened it last night to edit and it looked like a TV tuned to snow. I never touched it. It did it by itself. What about the button? I said, what button? I showed her. Her face changed the way it changes when she is framing an image, everything else shutting out. She reached for the bag and I pulled it back without meaning to. She blinked and her hand dropped into her lap. Sorry, I said. I just don't know if touching it is good. She smiled a short, humorless smile. Good isn't the word I've used for anything about this week. She leaned in, eyes scanning like a jeweler's. That's old, she said. You can fake patina, but you can't fake how the edge is dull where a coat rubs your side or a shawl catches. That's old. We didn't call anyone official. Who would you call exactly? And what would you say that wouldn't get you a note in a file that would haunt other parts of your life later? We did the things people do instead. We tried to box the experience inside ordinary chores. We sat with the TV on. We made soup. We told ourselves the smell we sometimes caught when we opened the refrigerator was the lettuce going, and not the pond choosing now to remind us it was a real place with real water. For a week, nothing else happened. The button stayed in its bag. The wet circles on Mark's carpet didn't come back. Alicia's photos sat in their folder. 3 good, 1 broken, like a mouth that lost a tooth. We were almost bored by our own restraint when the second thing came. This part is what I can't prove, and I need to say that before I tell it. It's what I remember, and I know how memory is. I know it's a sharp knife that sometimes cuts where you want and sometimes slips and opens something you didn't intend to touch. I woke to my bedroom light on. That sounds like a small sentence until you're the person under it. The light is a cheap ceiling fan fixture with 3 bulbs, and it felt like a stage lamp. I sat up with the button of my jeans digging into my stomach because I'd fallen asleep in yesterday's clothes. The air had a taste. It was stale and wet and not quite like anything you could buy in a bottle for your Halloween decor. I heard a sound that didn't belong in a dry room. A drip hitting water and then water hitting water again, and then the soft rush of something slipping from a height into a larger volume. My bathroom door was open. The light in there was off. The sound came from inside it anyway. I tried to talk and couldn't. Like my tongue had confidence I didn't share. I went anyway because I'm the kind of person who has to name the thing making the noise even when the word will hurt. There was water in my tub. Not full, 3 inches maybe. It was murky in a way that had nothing to do with my rusty pipes. It was pond water. Leaves floated on it, and a strip of something that could have been bark, or could have been cloth, but wasn't anything I could identify without touching it. The faucet was off. The handle was in the off position. The wet circles on the bath mat were footprints, bare, small, heels not quite pointed straight ahead. The kind of stance they teach you from a book on posture. I backed out of the room like the house had a mouth and I just noticed the teeth. I picked up my phone and called Alicia because if I called Mark, he would tell me to call the police, and I wasn't ready to explain why there was a pond in my tub. She answered on the 3rd ring, voice tight with sleep. I told her. She didn't tell me I was dreaming. She didn't say I was in shock. She said she would be over, and she was there in 22 minutes. Hair tied up and camera bag over her shoulder like this was a job she'd applied for and gotten. We stood in my bathroom and didn't take pictures. That's how you know the part of you that wants to live is still in charge. Instead, we watched the water. It didn't recede like a drain taking it. It lowered like a flat hand pressing down on it. The leaves sank in place. The strip of anything moved toward the drain as if persuaded and then stopped exactly over it, covering it like a plug. The smell thickened. I swallowed it and it slid down like a liquid. Alicia touched my sleeve. She didn't point. She nudged her chin toward the mirror as if she needed my sightline to match hers to trust what she saw. There was writing on the fogged glass that hadn't been fogged 5 minutes earlier. It wasn't words. It was two shapes like the ones on Mark's carpet. Not perfect circles, plate size, side by side. Under them, the smear of a hand. 3 fingers. The trail they left was lighter than the fog, a clean path through a thing that hadn't existed a second before. We stood with that for a long time. There isn't a good ending here. I wish there were. I wish I could say we watched the water go and the mirror cleared and nothing else happened, and we sat down at my kitchen table and decided never to talk about it again. But endings like that only belong to people who didn't have their doors open for them. The tub emptied. The leaves didn't whirl down the drain. They lay flat like paper and got smaller until they weren't there. The strip of whatever dissolved into lines like hair and then dust. The smell backed out of the room like a tide. I asked Alicia a question that felt like I was risking the friendship by asking it. "Do you think we brought something back?" She surprised me by saying no. "I don't think it follows people like that," she said. "I think if you touch a place that's already thin, sometimes it touches you back until it's done with you. That's not the same as being followed. It wasn't comfort, but it was something I could pick up and hold without it breaking." We cleaned. That's what you do when you can't fix the big thing. You fix the small ones in reach. We took a grocery bag to the trash chute and listened for the sound of it hitting bottom, like children listening for their parents coming up the steps. I put a towel over the bathroom mirror and then felt stupid and took it off again. The button stayed on my table in its bag. I didn't throw it away. Maybe I should have. Mark said he'd done the wrong thing with the coin, and I believed him. Alicia took the bag from me 4 days later and said she was going to put it somewhere safe. I didn't ask where. Safer than my kitchen sounded fine. Here is what I can tell you that might be useful if you go there. We didn't see the lantern again. We drove by the trailhead twice in the weeks after, and there was always someone standing near the gap in the fence, pretending to check their texts while they timed their entry with someone else's exit. Maybe they saw windows of light over the water. Maybe they didn't. The Forest Preserve officer, same one, I'm pretty sure, watched us drive past the second time and lifted his fingers from the wheel in a gesture that could have been hello, or could have been a reminder. He didn't stop us. He didn't need to. Alicia printed the 3 photos and put them in a folder she keeps in the back of her closet behind shoeboxes. She had them on the coffee table once when her mom came over, and her mom looked at them with the face mothers make when they think their children are getting too close to a cliff. "You kids with your nonsense," she said, but she didn't look away. She touched the white shape on the second photo with her index finger like a blessing, and then took her hand back quickly like it might be hot. Sometimes, if I'm honest, I wish the photo that broke hadn't broken. I want proof. I want a thing I can lay on the table between the coffee and the bills and say this happened, and no one has to stretch to meet me halfway. Then I remember the tub and the smell and the way the water went down, not like water should, and I think maybe the proof is not having to hold the worst version of it in my hand forever. I haven't been back. I'm not going to say I never will. People say never to make themselves feel in control of something they're not. What I can say is this: if you go in there, be respectful like you're walking into someone else's house even if the roof is gone. Don't talk loud. Don't pretend you know what you're seeing. The world is older than our explanations, and some places hold on to their stories in ways that don't care if we're ready. The last thing is small, and it's the one that sticks. I woke last week to the soft tick of something hitting my window. I thought it was a branch. It did it again, so gentle it felt polite. I went to the glass and looked down at the alley behind my apartment. Nothing, no wind, no kids. On the sill inside, just to the left of the latch, there was a wet circle the size of a teacup. No puddle, no stream, just a perfect ring like a glass had been there for a long, long time and someone lifted it when I stood up. It dried before I looked twice. There was no smell. I wiped the spot with my sleeve anyway, and I don't know why, but I said thank you out loud in a voice I barely recognized as mine. I haven't told Alicia or Mark about the ring on the sill. I don't know what keeping that to myself changes, if it changes anything. Maybe nothing. Maybe it's like those ripples that move straight out from her in the water. Something you've seen and can't prove, spreading through a shape it doesn't show on the surface. If you read this and you go to Bachelor's Grove and you see what we saw, Don't call her the woman in white like it's a category people use when they don't want to carry a real name. Don't name her anything at all. Just pay attention. If you watch the pond long enough, the water will tell you whether the night wants you to stay. It won't be words. It'll be the hush that falls when the last 2 lanterns lift and decide which bank to choose. If you're lucky, you'll miss them. If you're like us, you'll see, and you'll carry a circle of that place home with you without any of your pockets ever getting wet.